They say a woman's ruin happens in whispers. Mine came with a champagne toast and 300 witnesses. The night my fiancé, Richard Ashford, stood before London's elite and declared me worthless. Not quietly, not privately, but with the kind of theatrical cruelty that would be repeated in drawing rooms for months. I learned something crucial about survival. Sometimes the only way forward is through the fire itself. This is the story of how I became the woman no one expected, how a marriage of convenience became a war, and how the man they called heartless taught me that revenge is best served with absolute precision. Stay until the end. You won't believe what happens when a discarded woman stops playing by their rules. The Ashford ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles, each flame reflected in crystal chandeliers that cost more than most families earned in a year. I stood at the edge of the marble dance floor in a gown I could no longer afford, pale blue silk that had been my mother's, altered 3 times to hide the fact that we couldn't commission anything new. I was 23 years old, and I was about to lose everything. More champagne, Miss Whitmore? I turned to find Richard's younger brother, Thomas, holding 2 crystal flutes. Unlike Richard, Thomas had kind eyes. He'd always had kind eyes, which made him useless in the world we inhabited. Thank you, but no. I kept my voice steady, though my hands wanted to shake. I should find Richard. He asked me to meet him before the toast. Thomas's expression flickered, something like pity, quickly hidden. Clara, I think you should— There you are! Richard's voice cut through the music and conversation like a blade. He appeared through the crowd with his usual commanding presence, tall, golden-haired, impeccably dressed. 3 months ago, when he'd proposed, I'd thought myself the luckiest woman in England. The ring on my finger suddenly felt like a shackle. Richard! I smiled, the practiced expression I'd perfected over years of social training. I was just coming to find you. Perfect timing. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It never had, I realized with sudden, horrible clarity. How had I never noticed? I need you beside me for the announcement. Announcement, not toast. The word choice made something cold settle in my stomach. He took my arm too tightly, his fingers pressing into flesh hard enough to bruise, and led me toward the raised platform at the room's far end. The orchestra fell silent. Conversation dimmed to expectant murmurs. I'd been to hundreds of these gatherings. I knew the rhythm of high society like a dancer knows music. Something was wrong. The entire room was watching us, not with the warm anticipation of well-wishers, with the predatory focus of spectators waiting for blood sport. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard's voice carried across the ballroom with practiced ease. Thank you for joining us this evening. As many of you know, 3 months ago, I had the pleasure of asking Miss Clara Whitmore to be my wife. Polite applause. I felt every eye on us, measuring, judging. My smile stayed fixed. However, Richard continued, and the applause died. Circumstances have recently come to light that require reconsideration. The cold in my stomach turned to ice. It has been brought to my attention that the Whitmore family fortunes are not what they once were. In fact, they are non-existent. His voice carried a theatrical sympathy that made my skin crawl. Clara's father, God rest his soul, left nothing but debts. Her family home is mortgaged beyond recovery. She has no dowry, no property, no prospects. The room erupted in scandalized whispers. I stood frozen, my hand still locked in Richard's grip, as he systematically destroyed my life in front of 300 of London's most influential people. I am not, Richard said, raising his voice over the whispers, a heartless man. I understand that Miss Whitmore is not responsible for her family's misfortune. However, I am also not a fool. He turned to face me directly, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Enjoyment. He was enjoying this. Only a fool, he said clearly, slowly, ensuring every syllable carried, would marry a pauper. Only a fool would chain his family's legacy to a woman who brings nothing but debt and social embarrassment. The room had gone completely silent. Later, I would learn that Richard had been planning this for weeks, that he'd discovered my family's financial ruin shortly after our engagement and had been waiting for the perfect moment, the most public, most humiliating moment, to extract himself from the commitment. Later, I would learn that his cruelty had a purpose, to ensure no other man of quality would touch me afterward. A privately broken engagement might leave me damaged goods. A public spectacle would make me untouchable. But in that moment, standing on that platform with 300 pairs of eyes, witnessing my destruction, I only knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not beg. "Richard," I said quietly, and something in my voice made him pause. "You're right." Confusion flickered across his face. I pulled my hand from his grip and removed the ring from my finger in one smooth motion. The diamond caught the candlelight as I held it up. Only a fool would marry someone who mistakes cruelty for cleverness. I placed the ring in his palm and closed his fingers around it. "Congratulations on your narrow escape." Then I turned and walked. Not ran, walked. Through the silent ballroom, past the shocked faces and scandalized gasps, past Richard's mother, whose satisfied smile told me she'd orchestrated this from the beginning, past Thomas, whose kind eyes now held obvious pain. I walked with my spine straight and my head high, every step measured, every breath controlled. I made it to the entrance hall before my vision started to blur. "Miss Whitmore?" A voice stopped me at the door, deep, controlled, utterly calm in a way that made me want to scream. I turned to find a man I'd seen only once before, pointed out by my mother at last season's opening ball, Duke Adrian Blackwood, one of the wealthiest men in England and possibly the most reclusive. He was tall and dark-haired, dressed in black that made him look like a shadow come to life. "Your Grace." I managed a curtsy, though my legs felt like water. "If you'll excuse me." That was admirably done. I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Your exit." His eyes were gray, sharp as steel, and completely unreadable. Most women would have caused a scene, tears, perhaps, hysterics. "I don't cry in public, Your Grace." "No." Something flickered in his expression. Assessment, perhaps, or interest. "I can see that." We stood there for a long moment, the sounds of renewed conversation filtering from the ballroom behind us. Someone laughed, loud and cutting. They were already gossiping, already turning me into a cautionary tale. "If you'll excuse me," I said again. "I have a long walk home." "In the rain?" He gestured toward the windows where I could now see water streaming down the glass. When had it started raining? "Your carriage." "We sold the carriage 3 months ago." The words came out before I could stop them. God, I was so tired of pretending everything was fine when it hadn't been fine for over a year. And the horses and the house in the country, this, I gestured at my dress, was my mother's. We've been selling jewelry to pay for food. I don't know why I told him. Shock, maybe, or the simple relief of finally speaking the truth to someone who hadn't just watched my humiliation as entertainment. The Duke studied me for another long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a warm smile. Not sympathetic. Something else entirely. The kind of smile a chess player might wear when spotting an unexpected opportunity. "Walk with me," he said. "I should, please." It wasn't a request, not exactly a command either, something in between. I was too exhausted to argue, too numb to care. We walked through the entrance hall in silence, our footsteps echoing on marble floors. He led me to a small study off the main corridor, private, quiet, blessedly empty. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. I sat. He moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. Whiskey, I realized as he handed me one. Not the sweet wine ladies were supposed to drink. "Drink," he said. I drank. The whiskey burned down my throat, shocking and immediate. I gasped, then drank again. The Duke settled into the chair across from me, studying me with those unnervingly sharp eyes. "What do you know about me, Miss Whitmore?" The question caught me off guard. "You're, Duke Blackwood. You inherited the title 5 years ago when your father died. You rarely attend social events." I paused, trying to remember what else my mother had told me. "There was some scandal with your family's finances, but you recovered them." "Recovered them," he repeated, something dark crossing his face. "Yes, that's the polite version." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the whiskey glass dangling from his fingers. The truth is that my father nearly destroyed everything. Gambling debts, failed investments, loans to men who would never repay them. When he died, I inherited a dukedom worth less than nothing. The estates were mortgaged, the tenants were starving. London society was placing bets on how quickly I'd lose everything. I found myself leaning forward too, caught by something in his voice, a rawness that matched the rawness I felt. What did you do? I stopped trying to be liked. His smile was sharp now, dangerous. I cut off every person who saw me as a source of easy money. I fired every employee who'd been stealing from my father. I sold properties, called in favors, made enemies of men who'd been my father's friends. He took a drink. Within 2 years, I'd rebuilt everything. Within 5, I'd doubled it. Why are you telling me this? Because I saw something tonight that reminded me of myself 5 years ago. He set down his glass. A choice between breaking or becoming something else entirely. My heart was beating faster now. I don't understand. You will. He stood, moving to the window where rain streaked the glass. I need a wife, Miss Whitmore. Not for love. Not for companionship. I need a duchess who can manage a household, navigate society without flinching, and hold her ground when attacked. He turned back to me. I need someone strong enough to survive what comes with being my wife, someone who's already been tested by fire. I stared at him. You're proposing. I'm offering a partnership. His voice was matter-of-fact, businesslike. I need a capable duchess. You need resources, protection, and a name that can't be destroyed by gossip. We both need something neither of us can get alone. That's insane. Is it? He moved closer, his expression intense. In 6 months, when your family loses your London house, and you will, I've seen the mortgage papers, where will you go? What will you do? Your mother is too old to work, your sister is 15, without money, without connections, without a name worth defending. He let the words trail off. I knew what came next. I'd seen it happen to other families who fell from grace. Desperate marriages to cruel men. Positions as governesses or companions, unpaid labor masked as charity, poverty that slowly eroded every dignity until nothing remained but survival. I won't be anyone's pity case, I said quietly. Good, because I don't pity you. He knelt so we were eye level, and I saw in his face the same cold calculation I'd felt forming in my own chest since the moment Richard had publicly destroyed me. I respect you. You walked through that ballroom like a queen walking to the gallows. You didn't break. You didn't beg. You gave them nothing. What exactly are you offering? Marriage within the week, full control of household management. I have 3 estates that need attention I can't give them. An allowance of your own, not tied to my approval. Your family moved to my property in Kent, fully provided for, and in return, he paused. In return, you stand beside me. You learn the game these people play, and you master it. You become the kind of duchess that makes men like Richard Ashford look like the small, petty creatures they are. My hands were shaking. I set down the whiskey glass before I could drop it. Why me? You could marry anyone, someone with actual credentials. I don't want credentials. I want competence. His voice was fierce now. I've watched you at these gatherings, Miss Whitmore. You remember every name, every connection. You navigate conversations like a diplomat. You see patterns. He stood, offering his hand. You're wasted on a man like Ashford. He wanted a decoration. I need a partner. I looked at his hand, at his face, at the door that led back to the ballroom where 300 people were probably still discussing my spectacular fall from grace. I thought about my mother, who'd sold her jewelry to keep us fed, about my sister Charlotte, who was too young to understand how close we were to complete ruin, about the house we were about to lose, the creditors who called weekly, the slow starvation of our social death. I thought about Richard's face when he'd called me worthless, and I thought about the cold, burning thing that had taken root in my chest the moment he'd spoken. Not heartbreak, but something sharper, clearer. Rage. If I agree, I said slowly, I have conditions. The Duke's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe? Name them. My family is provided for completely. House, food, security, everything, non-negotiable. Agreed. I want access to estate records, real numbers, not a sanitized version for a decorative wife. Agreed. And I want the truth about why you really need this arrangement, about what I'm walking into. He was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. My former fiancée, Lady Margaret Havisham, is trying to destroy me. We were engaged 2 years ago. I ended it when I discovered she was feeding information about my business dealings to my competitors. She spent the last 2 years trying to ruin my reputation, sabotage my investments, and turn society against me. He met my eyes. If I marry someone else, someone strong enough to withstand her attacks, she loses her leverage. But it has to be someone who can't be easily intimidated, someone who's already survived public humiliation. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. I stood, smoothing my mother's altered dress with hands that had stopped shaking. Through the study window, I could see carriages arriving to collect guests. The ball would end soon. Everyone would go home to spread the story of my disgrace. By morning, all of London would know. By afternoon, I'd be unmarriageable. Unless… 1 week, I said. You said we'd marry within a week. I have a license prepared. We could marry tomorrow if you agreed. 3 days, I countered. I need 3 days to prepare my family. I swallowed hard. To say goodbye to who I was. The Duke studied me for a long moment. Then he extended his hand again. 3 days. And then you become the Duchess of Blackwood. I took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, absolutely steady. Then I suppose, I said quietly, we should discuss terms. We talked until the carriages stopped arriving, until the ballroom emptied and the servants began snuffing candles. We talked about estates and allowances, about expectations and boundaries, about the practical, bloodless details of a marriage built on necessity rather than affection. And when I finally left, not through the main entrance where someone might see me, but through a side door the Duke indicated, I walked out into the rain with my head high and my future rewritten. I didn't know if I was being brave or foolish. I didn't know if this cold, calculating partnership would save me or destroy me. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never be helpless again. The rain soaked through my mother's silk dress as I walked home through empty streets. My hair came loose from its pins. My shoes filled with water. I probably looked like exactly what Richard had called me, a pauper, desperate and ruined. But I wasn't thinking about Richard anymore. I was thinking about the look on his face when he learned I'd married a duke. I was thinking about estate ledgers and household management and all the things I'd been trained for but never allowed to actually do because women were supposed to be decorative, not useful. I was thinking about my mother's face when I told her we were saved, and I was thinking about the Duke's words. You're wasted on a man like Ashford. Maybe I had been. Maybe I'd been wasted on all of them, every man who'd looked at me and seen only a pretty face and a suitable bloodline, every woman who'd smiled while sharpening knives behind her back, every social rule that demanded I be small and quiet and grateful. 3 days. In 3 days, I would marry a stranger. In 3 days, I would become someone new. I reached our townhouse, small, shabby, mortgaged beyond saving, and let myself in quietly. My mother was already asleep. Charlotte, too. They didn't know yet that everything had changed. I climbed the stairs to my room and stood before the mirror in my ruined dress. The woman looking back at me was bedraggled, exhausted, and absolutely determined. Only a fool would marry a pauper, I whispered to my reflection. Then I smiled. Let them think the Duke was a fool. I knew better. I knew exactly what I'd agreed to. A partnership built on mutual need. A marriage of strategy, not sentiment. A cold, calculated arrangement that would either save us both or destroy whatever remained of our reputations. But I also knew something Richard Ashford would never understand. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is stop playing the game they expect her to play. Sometimes survival requires becoming someone they never saw coming. I unpinned what remained of my ruined hair and began to plan. 3 days. 3 days to transform from Clara Whitmore, discarded fiancée, and public scandal, into the Duchess of Blackwood. 3 days to learn everything I could about the man I was about to marry and the enemies I was about to face. 3 days to prepare for a war I hadn't chosen but refused to lose. The rain hammered against my window. Somewhere across London, Richard was probably celebrating his successful humiliation. Somewhere else, Lady Margaret Havisham was planning her next move against the Duke who'd rejected her. And here I was, in a mortgaged townhouse with water dripping from my hair, planning my counterattack. Let them underestimate me. Let them think I was desperate, broken, easy prey. They would learn. They would all learn. I was done being their victim. I was done being anyone's fool. In 3 days, I would walk into that church as Clara Whitmore, penniless, powerless, publicly shamed, and I would walk out as the Duchess of Blackwood. Everything else could burn. The morning light came too early, filtering through thin curtains that had once been expensive but now showed their age in threadbare patches. I'd barely slept, my mind cycling through numbers, strategies, and the sharp memory of Adrian Blackwood's gray eyes assessing me like a chess piece he'd decided to move. I had 2 days left before the wedding. Clara? My mother's voice came from the doorway, hesitant and worried. She still wore her nightdress, her graying hair loose around her shoulders. In the harsh morning light, I could see every line Worry had carved into her face over the past year. I heard about last night, she said softly. Mrs. Henderson's maid was at the ball. She sent word this morning, her hands twisted together. Oh, Clara, I'm so sorry. Richard was always... I'm getting married in 2 days. The words stopped her mid-sentence. She stared at me, confusion replacing sympathy. What? I sat up, pushing back the covers. My rain-soaked dress from last night lay discarded on the floor. I'd deal with the ruin of my mother's silk later. Right now, I had more important things to manage. Duke Blackwood proposed. I accepted. We marry Friday morning. My mother's face went through several expressions: shock, disbelief, hope, and finally suspicion. She'd been navigating society long enough to recognize when something didn't add up. The Duke Blackwood? The one who never attends social events? Who's been practically a recluse since his father died? She moved closer, sitting on the edge of my bed. Clara, what aren't you telling me? So I told her. Not everything. I didn't mention the cold calculation in Adrian's voice or the partnership built on mutual survival rather than affection. But I told her enough, that he needed a capable duchess, that we'd made an arrangement, that in exchange for marriage I would have resources to save our family. It's a business arrangement, I said flatly. Nothing more, but it's better than the alternative. My mother was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching my face. Then she did something that surprised me. She laughed. Not happily, but with a kind of bitter understanding. Your father and I married for love, she said quietly. And look where that got us. Maybe you're wiser than I was. She took my hand. But Clara, marriage to a duke, even a reclusive one, that's walking into a different kind of battlefield. Are you sure? I thought about Richard's face, about the whispers and stares, about the slow starvation of poverty I'd been watching consume us for months. I'm sure. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like preparing for war than a wedding. The Duke sent a carriage Wednesday morning with instructions to bring me to his London residence. Not a request, an expectation. I went alone, leaving my mother to begin packing what few possessions we had left. Blackwood House sat in one of London's most prestigious squares, a massive Georgian structure that made our mortgaged townhouse look like a servant's cottage. The butler who answered the door, an older man with the kind of dignified bearing that spoke of decades in service, studied me with barely concealed assessment. Miss Whitmore, he said, his tone neutral. His Grace is expecting you in the study. I followed him through halls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors and into a book-lined study where Adrian stood reviewing papers at a massive desk. He looked up as I entered, and I was struck again by how different he seemed from every other aristocrat I'd known. No performative charm, no social pleasantries, just direct, measuring attention. You came, he said. You sent a carriage. It seemed rude to refuse. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Sit. We have details to discuss. For the next 3 hours, we negotiated the terms of our arrangement with the cold precision of a business contract. He showed me ledgers from all three estates, Blackwood Manor in Kent, a smaller property in Yorkshire, and a hunting lodge in Scotland. The numbers were staggering, both in terms of wealth and complexity. The Kent estate is the priority, he said, pointing to a column of figures. 200 tenants, most of whom haven't had proper oversight in years. The house itself needs extensive repairs. The previous housekeeper retired last year, and her replacement is, he paused, inadequate. Fire her, I said simply. He looked up sharply. That easy? You said you needed someone who could manage a household. Managing means making hard decisions. I studied the numbers, my mind already working through the implications. How much latitude do I have? Complete authority over household operations, tenant relations, and estate management. I handle investments and politics. You handle everything else. And when our responsibilities overlap, we discuss it. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. As equals. That's the arrangement. Equals. The word felt foreign in my mouth. I'd been raised to defer to men, to smile and nod, and never openly disagree. But the Duke was watching me with an expression that suggested he expected more. What about Lady Margaret? I asked. His expression hardened. What about her? You said she's been trying to destroy you for 2 years. What exactly does that look like? What should I expect? He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Margaret is persistent. She has allies in society, women who believe I wronged her by ending our engagement. They've spread rumors about my business practices, questioned my character, made social events uncomfortable enough that I stopped attending. He met my eyes. She'll see you as either a pawn or a target, possibly both. And which would you prefer I be? Neither. His voice was sharp. I want you to be exactly what you showed me at the Ashford ball, someone who doesn't break under pressure, someone who walks through fire without flinching. That's a lot to ask of a marriage of convenience. Yes, he agreed. It is. We stared at each other across the desk, both of us calculating, both of us measuring what we were really agreeing to. Then he pulled out a small box and slid it across the polished wood surface. You'll need this. Inside was a ring, not the ostentatious diamond Richard had given me, but a simple band of gold with a single sapphire set in platinum. It was beautiful in its restraint, elegant without being showy. It was my grandmother's, Adrian said quietly. She was the only member of my family who understood the difference between wealth and worth. I slipped it on. It fit perfectly. How did you know my size? I asked the jeweler to match your glove size. You left gloves at the Ashford ball. One of the servants retrieved them. The attention to detail shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. This man missed nothing. Friday morning, he continued, back to business. We'll marry at St. George's. Small ceremony, just witnesses required by law. Your family will move to Kent that afternoon. I've arranged for the house to be prepared and staffed. That fast? Speed is necessary. The longer we wait, the more time Margaret has to interfere. He gathered the papers on his desk, and the more time society has to create narratives we don't control. He was right. Already the gossip would be spreading, speculation about why a duke would marry a disgraced woman, theories about desperation or scandal. Better to move quickly, present them with a fait accompli. I'll need appropriate clothing, I said, for the ceremony and for after. My current wardrobe is being handled. He nodded toward a door I hadn't noticed. Mrs. Roberts is waiting in the next room. She's a dressmaker, I trust. She'll outfit you for the immediate future. Once we're settled in Kent, you can commission a full wardrobe. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt something closer to vertigo, the reality of how completely my life was about to change, hitting me all at once. Adrian, I said, using his name for the first time, what if I'm terrible at this? What if I can't? You won't be. His certainty was absolute. I've built my success on reading people, Clara. I know competence when I see it. He stood, coming around the desk. You're afraid. That's reasonable. But fear and capability aren't mutually exclusive. You sound very sure. I am. He offered his hand, not romantically, but as a partner sealing an agreement. We both are, or we wouldn't be doing this. I took his hand and, for the second time in 2 days, felt the solid warmth of his grip, steady, certain, completely without hesitation. 2 days, I said. 2 days, he agreed. Mrs. Roberts turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who measured me with the efficient ruthlessness of someone who'd dressed enough aristocrats to have no patience for nonsense. She had me in and out of 3 different dresses in under an hour, each one perfectly tailored to hide the weight I'd lost over the past months of sporadic meals. "You'll need feeding up," she observed, pinning a dove-gray traveling dress. "Too thin by half, but we'll work with what we have." The wedding dress she'd prepared was simpler than what I'd expected. Cream silk with minimal ornamentation, elegant rather than elaborate. Not the kind of gown a woman wore when marrying for love, but exactly right for what this was. A practical arrangement between 2 practical people. "It's perfect," I told her. She sniffed, but I caught the hint of approval in her eyes. "His Grace has good taste when he bothers to use it. Now hold still while I pin the hem." I returned home that evening to find my mother and Charlotte already packing. My sister, blonde, 15, and still young enough to see this as an adventure rather than a calculated survival strategy, threw her arms around me the moment I walked in. "A duchess!" she squealed. "Clara, you're going to be a duchess. Will you have a tiara? Will there be balls?" "Charlotte, let your sister breathe," my mother chided, but she was smiling. Really smiling, for the first time in months. The relief in her eyes was almost painful to see. That night, after Charlotte had finally stopped asking questions and gone to bed, my mother and I sat together in what had been my father's study. The room was nearly empty now. We'd sold most of the furniture months ago, but we kept 2 chairs in the memory of better times. "Are you happy?" she asked quietly. I considered the question. Happy felt like the wrong word for what I was. Determined, maybe. Resolved. Ready. "I'm surviving," I said finally. "That's enough." "Your father would have wanted more for you." "Father wanted a lot of things." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "He wanted to maintain appearances even when we couldn't afford them. He wanted to pretend everything was fine even as the debts piled up. He wanted to protect us," my mother interrupted softly. "He just didn't know how." We sat in silence, both thinking about the man who'd loved us, but left us with nothing but debt and fading gentility. "The Duke," my mother said eventually. "He seems different." "He is." "Do you trust him?" I thought about Adrian's gray eyes, his careful honesty, the way he'd laid out our arrangement without pretense or false promises. "I trust that we want the same things," I said. "That's more than most marriages have." Friday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of autumn day that felt like a warning. I dressed in the cream silk gown, let Charlotte fuss with my hair, and tried not to think about what I was walking into. The carriage Adrian sent was elegant, but understated. No blackwood crest emblazoned on the side to draw attention. Smart. The fewer people who knew about this wedding before it was done, the better. St. George's was nearly empty when we arrived. Just Adrian, looking severe and black, and 2 witnesses I didn't recognize. An older woman who Adrian introduced as his aunt, Lady Catherine, and a younger man who turned out to be a solicitor. No flowers, no music, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was. The ceremony took less than 15 minutes. I spoke my vows in a steady voice, focusing on the practical meaning of the words rather than their traditional weight. Adrian did the same, his tone businesslike, almost clinical. When the priest pronounced us married, Adrian kissed me briefly, a formal touch of lips that meant nothing and everything. We were bound now, legally and socially. Whatever came next, we would face it as Duke and Duchess Blackwood. Lady Catherine pulled me aside as we signed the registry. "You're either very brave or very foolish," she said bluntly. "I haven't decided which." "Does it matter?" She laughed, sharp and genuine. "I like you already. That's good. You'll need allies." Her expression turned serious. "My nephew is a good man, but he's made enemies. Powerful ones. Being his wife won't be easy." "I didn't expect easy." "No," she agreed, studying me with eyes remarkably similar to Adrian's. "I don't think you did. Just remember, Survival isn't the same as surrender. Don't let them break you. I won't. See that you don't? She squeezed my hand once, surprisingly warm. Welcome to the family, Duchess. We left London that afternoon in a convoy of carriages. One for Adrian and me, one for my mother and Charlotte, one for luggage and the small staff Adrian had assembled. The journey to Kent would take most of the day. I sat across from my husband, that word still felt strange, and watched the city disappear behind us. Nervous? He asked. Should I be? Probably. He was looking out the window, his profile sharp against the afternoon light. The staff at Blackwood Manor haven't had proper management in over a year. They're accustomed to doing as they please. Some of them will resent you. Because I'm new or because I'm your wife? Both? He turned to face me. And because you're young and they'll assume you're decorative, you'll have to prove otherwise quickly. Any advice? Don't apologize for making decisions. Don't ask permission when you should be giving orders. And fire anyone who undermines you, immediately and publicly. His voice was matter-of-fact. Mercy is fine once you've established authority. Before that, it's weakness. I thought about my mother's gentle approach to household management, her endless patience with staff who increasingly took advantage of her kindness as our fortunes declined. That seems harsh. It is harsh. He didn't flinch from it. But effectiveness matters more than likability. You can be loved later. Right now, you need to be respected. We rode in silence for a while, the carriage swaying over increasingly rural roads. I watched the countryside roll past, fields turning gold with autumn, small villages where people stopped to stare at our convoy, the gradual transition from city to estate country. What happened with Margaret? I asked finally. The real story, not the version you gave me to make the arrangement sound reasonable. Adrian was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, a sound of old frustration. We were engaged for 6 months, I thought. He stopped, choosing words carefully. I thought I'd found someone who understood the kind of partnership I needed. She was intelligent, well-connected, capable. And she seemed to want the same things I did, a marriage built on mutual benefit rather than romantic delusion. What changed? I discovered she was feeding information about my business investments to Lord Hastings, one of my primary competitors. Strategies, property acquisitions, even private correspondence. His voice went cold. She was using our engagement as a way to access information her family could profit from. So you ended it. Immediately. He met my eyes. I don't tolerate betrayal. Not in business and not in marriage, even a marriage of convenience. Is that a warning? It's a fact. But his expression softened slightly. I'm not worried about you, Clara. You had every opportunity to use our arrangement for social advantage, to spread the story, to make yourself interesting to gossip circles. You didn't. You kept it quiet, as I asked. That tells me what I need to know about your character. It shouldn't have mattered, his good opinion of me. This was business, not friendship. But something in my chest loosened anyway at his words. We arrived at Blackwood Manor as the sun began to set, casting the estate in golden light that made it look like something from a painting. The house was massive. 3 stories of honey-colored stone, with more windows than I could quickly count, surrounded by formal gardens that showed signs of recent neglect. But it was the staff lined up at the entrance that made my stomach clench. At least 30 people stood in formation. Housemaids, footmen, kitchen staff, groundskeepers, all watching our approach with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. At the front stood a woman who could only be the housekeeper Adrian had mentioned, her face set in lines of rigid disapproval. "That's Mrs. Winters," Adrian murmured as the carriage stopped. "She served my mother. She believes she knows how things should be done." "And she's about to learn otherwise," I said quietly. He smiled. A real smile this time, sharp and approving. "Good. Show them who you are." I stepped out of the carriage before anyone could help me, my cream silk traveling dress catching the last light. The staff's eyes tracked every movement, judging, weighing, finding me wanting. I'd been judged before. I'd survived it. Mrs. Winters stepped forward, her curtsy so minimal it was barely polite. "Your Grace," she said to Adrian, pointedly not acknowledging me. "Welcome home." "Mrs. Winters." Adrian's voice was cool. "May I present my wife, the Duchess of Blackwood? She will be taking over management of the household effective immediately." The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken resistance. "Of course, Your Grace," Mrs. Winters said, her tone suggesting anything but agreement, though perhaps Her Grace would prefer to settle in before taking on such complex responsibilities. It was a test. They were all watching to see if I would defer, if I would accept being sidelined by a servant who clearly believed she knew better. I thought about Adrian's advice. Don't apologize. Don't ask permission. "Mrs. Winters," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the assembled staff, "I'll need to see the household accounts tonight. All of them. Monthly expenditures, staff wages, maintenance costs, and any outstanding debts. Please have them ready in the study within the hour." Her expression hardened. "Tonight? But Your Grace, surely after such a long journey." "Within the hour," I repeated. Then I turned to address the full staff. "I know you're not accustomed to having a duchess in residence. That changes now. I expect excellence, loyalty, and honest work. In return, you'll be fairly compensated and treated with respect." I let my gaze sweep across them all. "But make no mistake, this is my household now. Those who cannot accept that are free to seek employment elsewhere." The silence was absolute. Then, from somewhere in the back, a young maid dropped into a proper curtsy. "Welcome home, Your Grace." One by one, the others followed, some more reluctantly than others, but they followed. All except Mrs. Winters, whose rigid posture radiated fury barely contained. "The accounts," I said again. 1 hour. I turned and walked into my new home without waiting for her response. Adrian caught up with me in the entrance hall, his hand briefly touching my elbow, the first gesture of affection, however small, since our perfunctory wedding kiss. "Well done," he murmured, "though you've made an enemy of Mrs. Winters. I'll survive." I was already studying the hall, noting peeling wallpaper, scuffed floors, a chandelier missing half its crystals. "This house needs work." "It needs you," he corrected. Then, more businesslike. "I'll be in London most of next week. Investments that require personal attention. You'll be alone here." Alone. With a hostile housekeeper, a staff I'd just challenged, and a house falling apart around me. "Perfect," I said, meaning it. "I'll get more done without distractions." His smile was genuine this time. Approval and something else. Respect, maybe. "I chose well," he said quietly. Before I could respond, footsteps announced my mother and Charlotte arriving, both of them staring around at the magnificent decay of our new home with wide eyes. "It's enormous," Charlotte breathed. "It's ours," I said. Then to Adrian, "You should show them to their rooms. I have accounts to review." The study Mrs. Winters directed me to was clearly meant to be intimidating. My father-in-law's former domain, masculine and dark, with portraits of stern Blackwood ancestors glowering from the walls. The account books she'd left were a disaster. I spent 3 hours going through them, my anger building with every page. Expenses inflated, wages inconsistent, entire categories of spending that made no sense. Either Mrs. Winters was incompetent or she was stealing, possibly both. A knock interrupted my 4th hour of calculations. "Come in." Adrian entered, changed from his formal wedding clothes into simpler attire that made him look less like a duke and more like a man. He carried 2 glasses of wine. "You missed dinner," he said, handing me one. "I was working." I gestured at the books spread across the desk. "Your housekeeper is either a thief or an idiot." I suspected as much. He settled into the chair across from me. "What will you do?" "Fire her. Tomorrow morning. Publicly." I took a drink, the wine warming me from the inside. "Then I'll promote someone from within, someone competent who will be grateful enough for the opportunity to be loyal." "You sound certain." "I am certain." I closed the ledger, meeting his eyes. "You hired me to do a job. I'm doing it." We sat there in the lamplight, 2 strangers bound by law and necessity, drinking wine and discussing staffing decisions like the business partners we were. It should have felt cold, transactional. Instead, it felt like the first honest conversation I'd had in years. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for this, for not pretending it's something it isn't." "Thank you," he replied, "for being exactly who I needed you to be." Later, when he showed me to my room, separate from his as we'd agreed, I stood at the window looking out over grounds I now supposedly controlled. Somewhere out there, in the tenant cottages and stables, people were talking about me, judging me, waiting for me to fail. Let them wait. I'd been declared worthless in front of 300 witnesses. I'd survived Richard's cruelty and society's judgment. I'd walked through fire and come out hardened, not broken. Tomorrow, I would fire Mrs. Winters. Then I would fix this house, this estate, this fractured world Adrian had given me authority over. And eventually, maybe weeks from now, maybe months, the people who'd expected me to fail would learn what Richard Ashford had learned too late. Underestimating me was their first mistake. Expecting me to stay down was their last. I touched the sapphire ring on my finger. My grandmother's ring, Adrian had said. A woman who knew the difference between wealth and worth. I would prove worthy of it, whatever it took, whatever it took. The words became my mantra as I rose before dawn the next morning, dressed in a severe gray gown that Mrs. Roberts had called appropriate for estate management, and prepared for my first real test as Duchess of Blackwood. I found Mrs. Winters in the servants' hall, presiding over breakfast like a queen holding court. The conversation died the moment I entered. 20 pairs of eyes turned to watch me, measuring, waiting. "Mrs. Winters," I said clearly, "a word in the study, now." Her expression flickered, surprise, then irritation, then something harder. "I'm in the middle of organizing the morning duties, Your Grace. Perhaps after, now." The silence stretched. I could feel the staff watching, could sense them wondering if I would back down, if this new Duchess was all show and no substance. Mrs. Winters rose slowly, her movements deliberate, designed to show that she came of her own accord, not because I'd commanded it. Fine. Let her maintain that illusion for another 5 minutes. She followed me to the study, her footsteps heavy with disapproval. I closed the door behind us and turned to face her. "You're dismissed," I said simply. "You have until noon to pack your things and leave the estate." Her face went white, then red. "Dismissed? Your Grace, I've served this family for 30 years. And in that time, you've managed to inflate expenses by at least 30%, create a system of waste that costs this estate thousands of pounds annually, and foster an atmosphere of insubordination among the staff." I picked up the ledger I'd been reviewing. "These are the accounts you provided. Would you like to explain why the household is spending twice the reasonable amount on basic supplies?" The Duke never complained. The Duke was focused on saving this estate from bankruptcy. He didn't have time to notice a housekeeper stealing from him. I set down the ledger. "I do." Her hands clenched into fists. "You have no proof of theft. Those are legitimate expenses. Then you're incompetent rather than dishonest. Either way, you're finished here." I moved to the desk, pulling out an envelope I'd prepared that morning. "Here is 2 months' wages and a letter of reference that states you retired for health reasons. It's more generous than you deserve, but I won't have it said that the Duchess of Blackwood turns out elderly servants without cause." She snatched the envelope, her face twisted with fury. "You think you can just walk in here and tear apart everything? You're a child playing at being a duchess. You'll fail. And when you do, when the Duke realizes what a mistake he's made marrying some desperate pauper, careful." My voice went cold. "You're on my property. You have 9 hours left to leave it peacefully. I suggest you use them." She stared at me, and I saw the moment she realized I meant every word. That I wouldn't back down, wouldn't be intimidated, wouldn't tolerate another second of her authority in my household. "The Duke will hear about this," she said. "I certainly hope so. I'll tell him myself this evening." I moved to open the door. "Goodbye, Mrs. Winters." She swept past me, radiating outrage, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. I waited until I heard her climbing the stairs to the servants' quarters before allowing myself to breathe. 1 down. I returned to the servants' hall where the staff had clearly been listening at the door. They scattered as I entered, suddenly very busy with various tasks. "Everyone stop," I said. They froze. "Mrs. Winters is leaving. Within the hour, I'll need someone to step into the role of housekeeper. Someone competent, organized, and loyal. If you think that's you, or if you know someone who fits that description, come see me in the study before noon." I scanned their faces, looking for intelligence, for capability, for something other than the resigned mediocrity Mrs. Winters had cultivated. A woman near the back raised her hand tentatively, mid-30s, plain-faced, with the kind of practical competence that showed in every efficient movement. Your Grace, I'm Anne Garrett. I've been assistant housekeeper for 5 years. Before Mrs. Winters, before things changed, I managed the inventory system and staff schedules. Why did you stop? She hesitated, glancing at the other servants. Mrs. Winters didn't appreciate suggestions, Your Grace. Said I was overstepping. Translation: she'd noticed the waste and been silenced for it. Come to the study at noon, I said. Bring any ideas you have for improving household efficiency. Her face lit up with something that looked like hope. Yes, Your Grace. I spent the rest of the morning touring the house with a critical eye, making notes of every repair needed, every inefficiency, every corner where neglect had taken root. The place was a study in beautiful decay, good bones underneath layers of deferred maintenance and poor management. It was fixable. All of it was fixable. Anne Garrett arrived at my study door at exactly noon, carrying a leather-bound notebook and wearing an expression of determined competence. Show me what you have, Itam, I said. For the next hour, she walked me through a system she'd designed years ago, a complete reorganization of household operations that would cut costs by 40% while improving service quality. She had charts, schedules, supplier comparisons, and a staff training program that was remarkably sophisticated. This is excellent work, I said when she finished. Why didn't you implement it? Mrs. Winters said it was too complicated, that the old ways worked fine. Anne's voice was bitter. But the old ways were bleeding the estate dry, and she knew it. She just didn't care because it gave her power, controlling who got extra rations, who got better assignments. She ran this household like her personal fiefdom. Not anymore. I closed the notebook. You're the new housekeeper, effective immediately. Implement this system. Anyone who objects can join Mrs. Winters in seeking employment elsewhere. Anne's eyes widened. Your Grace, thank you. I won't let you down. I know you won't, because if you do, I'll fire you just as quickly as I fired her. I softened slightly. But I don't think that will happen. You care about this house. That's worth more than experience. She nodded, blinking back tears. I do care. This place could be magnificent again if someone would just— Someone will, I interrupted. Us. Starting today. By evening, the household had undergone a complete transformation. Anne had the staff working at a pace they clearly hadn't experienced in years, and while there was some grumbling, I also noticed something else: pride. They were remembering what it felt like to work in a properly run estate. Adrian returned from London 3 days later to find the entrance hall gleaming, the chandelier repaired and sparkling, and accounts that finally made sense. He found me in what had been his mother's sitting room, reviewing fabric samples for new curtains. You fired Mrs. Winters, he said without preamble. I did. I didn't look up from the samples. She was stealing from you. I have documentation if you'd like to review it. I don't need documentation. He settled into the chair across from me, and I finally looked up to find him watching me with that same assessing expression from the night we'd met. I need to know if her replacement is competent. Anne Garrett is more than competent. She's brilliant. Give me 3 months, and this household will run more efficiently than any estate in England. Bold claim. Accurate claim. I set down the fabric samples. The house needs significant repairs, the roof, the plumbing, several structural issues. I've gotten estimates. Here. I handed him a folder containing detailed assessments and cost projections. He read through them, his expression unreadable. This will cost a fortune, he said finally, less than letting it continue to decay, and significantly less than Mrs. Winters was stealing annually. I met his eyes. You hired me to manage this estate. I'm managing it. If you don't trust my judgment, I trust it. He closed the folder. Proceed with the repairs, whatever you need. Something in my chest loosened, validation I hadn't realized I needed. How is London? I asked. His expression darkened. Margaret knows about our marriage. She's not pleased. I didn't expect her to be. She's planning something. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. My sources say she's been meeting with several influential society women. They're organizing for the Hastings Ball next month, the season's major event. And you think she'll make a move there? I know she will. His voice was grim. The question is what kind of move and how to prepare for it. I thought about Richard's public humiliation, about the way cruelty became entertainment for the bored elite. She'll try to make me look weak, I said slowly, incompetent, like I trapped you or bought my way in. She'll want to prove I don't belong. Probably. Then we don't give her the chance. An idea was forming, dangerous but potentially brilliant. What if we strike first? Adrian's eyes sharpened. What did you have in mind? The tenant situation. You said it's been neglected. For years. Most of the cottages need repairs. The families are barely surviving. Then we fix it, publicly. I was thinking faster now, strategy clicking into place. We make a show of estate improvements, tenant welfare, modernization. We invite the local gentry to witness it. We make me visible as a duchess who actually works, who cares about the people under her authority. That's not how things are done, Adrian said, but he was listening intently. Aristocrats don't publicize their charity work. It's considered vulgar. Everything I do is considered vulgar by their standards. I'm already the pauper who married a duke. We might as well make that work for us. I stood, pacing now. Margaret will paint me as a social climber. We paint me as something else, a duchess who prioritizes substance over style, someone who threatens the old order by actually being useful. It's risky. You'll make enemies. I already have enemies. I turned to face him. But I'll also make allies. The people who matter, the tenants, the staff, the local merchants, people with long memories and longer gratitude. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You're playing a completely different game than she is, he said finally. I have to. I can't win by her rules. I moved closer. But I can change the rules entirely. Make the game about competence instead of pedigree. Work instead of reputation. Substance instead of scandal. And if it doesn't work? If she destroys you anyway? I thought about the walk through the Ashford ballroom, about surviving public humiliation, about learning that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Then I'll survive that too, I said simply. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. I definitely chose well. The next 3 weeks were a blur of strategic action. I threw myself into estate management with an intensity that surprised even me, driving the staff hard but fairly, making decisions quickly, and implementing changes with ruthless efficiency. The tenant cottages were my priority. I visited every family personally, documenting their needs, promising improvements, and actually delivering them. New roofs, repaired walls, winter stores of food, medical care for sick children. Word spread. The local gentry started talking, some with approval, most with scandalized disapproval. A duchess doing common work? Visiting tenants like some kind of social reformer? It simply wasn't done. I didn't care. What I cared about was the look in a tenant mother's eyes when I arranged for her daughter to see a proper doctor, the relief on an elderly farmer's face when I authorized repairs to his cottage before winter, the growing respect I saw in the staff as they realized I meant what I said about excellence and fair treatment. Adrian watched it all from a distance, managing his London business, but returning to Kent every few days. We fell into a rhythm, partners coordinating strategy, comparing notes, planning next moves. It wasn't marriage as I'd once imagined it. There was no romance, no pretense of affection we didn't feel. But there was something else. Respect. Trust. The kind of partnership where you knew someone had your back because they'd proven it repeatedly. And then, 3 weeks before the Hastings Ball, everything changed. I was in the village, meeting with the local doctor about expanded medical services for tenant families, when a carriage pulled up. Expensive, ostentatious, with a crest I didn't recognize. A woman stepped out, and I knew immediately who she was. Lady Margaret Havisham was beautiful in the way poison is beautiful. All elegant lines and dangerous curves, with honey blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. She wore a gown that cost more than most people earned in a year, and she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Duchess Blackwood," she said, her voice dripping false sweetness. "How delightful to finally meet you. I've heard so much. Lady Margaret. I kept my voice neutral. What brings you to Kent? Oh, I was just visiting friends in the area and thought I'd stop by. Her smile was sharp. I wanted to see the woman who finally caught our dear Adrian's attention. He's been so elusive since our unfortunate misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. She made betrayal sound like a social faux pas. I'm afraid the Duke is in London, I said, but I'd be happy to tell him you called. Actually, I was hoping to speak with you. She glanced around at the village street, at the modest shops and curious onlookers, though perhaps somewhere more private, unless you're too busy with your charitable work. The way she said charitable made it sound obscene. I should have refused, should have recognized the trap. But I was curious, and confident enough in my position to think I could handle whatever game she was playing. There's a tea room across the street, I said. We can talk there. The tea room was small but clean, run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, who served the best scones in the county. Margaret looked around with barely concealed disdain as we settled at a corner table. How quaint, she murmured. Adrian always did have eccentric taste. I find it charming, I replied evenly, but you didn't come here to discuss interior decoration. What do you want, Lady Margaret? She smiled, stirring sugar into her tea with delicate precision. Direct. I appreciate that. So I'll be direct too. She met my eyes. I want you to annul your marriage. I actually laughed. Excuse me? You heard me. End this farce before it destroys you both. She leaned forward, voice dropping. You're a smart woman, Clara. Surely you realize this marriage is a disaster waiting to happen. You're not equipped to be a duchess. You don't have the training, the connections, or the social standing. Adrian married you in a moment of poor judgment, but it's not too late to fix it. And why would I do that? Because I'm offering you a way out. She pulled a folded paper from her reticule. This is a contract. Agree to annul the marriage, and I'll provide you with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Your family, too. A house, an income, everything you need. All you have to do is walk away. I stared at the paper, then at her. You're trying to buy me off. I'm trying to save you from embarrassment. Her voice hardened. The Hastings ball is in 3 weeks. I've ensured that everyone who matters will be there. And they'll all be watching you, waiting for you to fail, to prove that you're exactly what Richard Ashford said you were. A pauper, a nobody, a desperate woman who trapped a duke. I didn't trap anyone. Didn't you? She smiled. You were publicly humiliated, financially ruined, and socially destroyed. Then suddenly, conveniently, Adrian proposes. A man who'd rejected me, who'd avoided marriage for years. Don't you find that suspicious? I find it practical. We have an arrangement that benefits us both. An arrangement. She said it like it was something dirty. Is that what you're calling it? How romantic. She pushed the contract across the table. Take the money, Clara. Walk away with your dignity intact. Because I promise you, if you show up at that ball, if you try to play in a world you don't understand, I will destroy you so completely that you'll wish you'd stayed buried in obscurity. The threat was clear, delivered with such casual confidence that it took my breath away. I looked at the contract, at the number written there, enough money to save my family 3 times over. Enough to never worry again. All I had to do was give up. Give up the estate I was rebuilding, the staff who were starting to respect me, the tenants who depended on me, the partnership I'd built with Adrian. Give up who I was becoming. I picked up the contract, and Margaret's smile turned triumphant. Then I tore it in half. No, I said simply. Her smile vanished. You're making a mistake. I've made mistakes before. I survived them. I stood, leaving the torn contract on the table. Thank you for the offer, Lady Margaret, but I'm not interested in running away. Not from you, not from society, not from anything. You'll regret this. Possibly. I pulled on my gloves, meeting her ice-chip eyes with my own steady gaze. But I'll regret it as a duchess, not as a coward. I walked out of that tea room with my heart pounding, knowing I'd just declared war on one of the most powerful women in English society. I told Adrian everything that evening, watching his face darken as I described Margaret's offer and threat. She's escalating, he said grimly. I didn't think she'd move this fast or this boldly. What will she do at the ball? I don't know, but it will be public, humiliating, and calculated to destroy your reputation completely. He stood, pacing. We should consider not attending. Let her make her move to an empty room. No. He turned sharply. Clara. No, I repeated. If we don't show up, we look weak, like we're hiding. That confirms everything she wants people to believe, that I'm ashamed, that our marriage is a sham, that I don't belong. I moved closer. We have to face her, and we have to win. How? I'd been thinking about this since the moment I'd torn up Margaret's contract, about what weapons I had in a fight where I was outmatched in every traditional sense. We changed the battlefield, I said. She wants to fight about legitimacy, about whether I deserve to be a duchess. We don't fight that battle. We fight a different one, about what it means to be a duchess at all. I don't follow. She'll attack my background, my poverty, my desperation, all things I can't change or defend. I was thinking out loud now, strategy crystallizing. But what if I own them? What if I make them strengths instead of weaknesses? You want to acknowledge your poverty publicly. I want to redefine what matters. I grabbed his hands, needing him to understand. She represents the old way, marriages for bloodlines, duchesses as ornaments, aristocracy as inherited right. I represent something different, competence over pedigree, work over birthright, partnership over property. That's dangerous thinking. It's the truth. I squeezed his hands. And it's the only weapon I have, so I either use it or I lose. He studied me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant he made his decision. Then we use it, he said. Together. The 3 weeks until the Hastings ball were the hardest of my life. Margaret's campaign against me intensified, subtle at first, then increasingly blatant. Rumors spread through society like wildfire that I'd trapped Adrian with pregnancy claims, that my family's debts were worse than anyone knew, that I was vulgar and grasping and completely unsuitable. I heard them all. Anne kept me informed with the help of her network of servants who worked in other great houses. They're saying you don't know how to manage a household, Your Grace, she reported one evening, that you fired Mrs. Winters out of incompetence and the estate is falling apart. Good, I said, making notes on tomorrow's schedule. Let them think I'm failing. The truth will be more effective for the contrast. But the rumors hurt. Each one was designed to hit where I was most vulnerable, my background, my inexperience, my desperate circumstances. What kept me going was the work. Every day I saw tangible proof that I was succeeding where it mattered. The household ran more efficiently than it had in years. Tenant families were healthier, better housed, more secure. Estate finances improved dramatically. And slowly, carefully, I built alliances. I visited neighboring estates, not as a social climber seeking acceptance, but as a duchess seeking practical partnerships. I talked to other estate managers about agricultural improvements, to local merchants about supply chains, to anyone who valued competence over gossip. Some doors slammed in my face, others opened cautiously. I didn't need everyone to accept me. I just needed enough people to see that I was actually good at this job. The night before the Hastings ball, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my window watching moonlight turn the garden silver, trying to quiet the voice in my head that said I was about to walk into a slaughter. A knock on my door startled me. Come in. Adrian entered, still fully dressed despite the late hour. You're awake. So are you. He joined me at the window, both of us staring out at the peaceful grounds. After a moment, he said quietly, You could still back out. We could claim illness, postpone until Margaret's attention shifts elsewhere. Would it shift? Or would she just find a new opportunity to attack? Probably the latter. Then we face her tomorrow. I turned to look at him. I'm not afraid of her, Adrian. I'm afraid of failing you, of proving everyone right that you made a mistake marrying me. You haven't failed me. His voice was intense. You've exceeded every expectation. This estate, these people, everything you've touched, you've made it better, stronger. He took my hand, the gesture surprising us both. Margaret can say whatever she wants tomorrow. She can't change the truth. What truth? that you're the best decision I've made in years." He squeezed my hand once, then released it. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we go to war." The Hastings ball was everything I'd expected and worse. The ballroom blazed with enough candles to stage a theatrical production, packed with 300 of England's most influential people, all of them waiting to witness my destruction. I wore a gown of deep sapphire blue that Mrs. Roberts had designed specifically for this night, elegant, expensive, and utterly suitable for a duchess. My mother's pearls at my throat. Adrian's grandmother's ring on my finger. I looked the part. The question was whether anyone would believe it. We arrived fashionably late, as Adrian had insisted. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let the tension build. The moment we entered, conversation didn't just dim, it stopped completely. 300 pairs of eyes turned to stare. I felt Adrian's arm beneath my hand, steady and solid. We walked through that crowd like we were walking through the Ashford ballroom all over again, but this time I wasn't alone. Duchess Blackwood. Lord Hastings himself appeared, his smile strained. "How delightful you could attend, Your Grace." This to Adrian. "It's been too long." "Lord Hastings," Adrian said coolly, "thank you for the invitation." We were escorted to a receiving area where Margaret held court like a queen, surrounded by her allies, a circle of society women whose names I'd memorized, whose weaknesses Anne had helped me research. Margaret saw us and smiled. It was the smile of a predator about to strike. "Adrian," she purred, ignoring me completely. "How wonderful to see you, and you brought your wife." "I brought my Duchess," Adrian corrected, his voice carrying. "Clara, you remember Lady Margaret?" "Of course." I dropped a curtsy, not too deep, not too shallow, perfect. "How lovely to see you again, Lady Margaret." Her eyes narrowed at my composure. She'd expected me to be nervous, perhaps, intimidated. "Tell me," she said loudly, drawing the attention of nearby guests, "how are you finding estate management? It must be so different from what you're accustomed to." The trap was obvious. Any answer would confirm I was out of my depth. "Challenging," I said honestly, "but rewarding. I've learned more in 3 weeks than I learned in 23 years of ornamental education." A ripple of laughter, uncertain, waiting to see which way this would go. "How refreshingly candid," Margaret said. "Most duchesses would claim natural aptitude rather than admit inexperience." "Most duchesses were raised for the role. I'm having to learn it." I met her eyes. "But inexperience and incompetence aren't the same thing. I may be new to this, but I'm quite good at it." "Are you?" Her voice turned sharp. "I've heard concerning rumors about Blackwood Manor. Staff dismissals, radical changes, tenant favoritism. Some would say you're destroying a heritage estate. Some would be wrong." I kept my voice level. "I dismissed one employee who was stealing. I implemented efficiency improvements that have cut costs by 40% while improving service quality. And I've ensured tenant families have weatherproof housing and adequate food stores for winter." I paused. "Which specific changes concern you, Lady Margaret?" She blinked, caught off guard by my directness. "I merely worry that Adrian's estates are in uncertain hands." "My hands," Adrian said quietly, his voice cutting through the growing crowd of listeners, "are not uncertain. I chose Clara specifically because she has qualities most aristocrats lack: practical competence, genuine intelligence, and the ability to see problems clearly rather than through layers of social pretense." Margaret's smile turned poisonous. "How romantic! A marriage based on utility rather than affection. Though I suppose when one partner brings nothing but desperation to the arrangement—" "Careful!" Adrian's voice went cold. "You're talking about my wife." "I'm talking about the truth." Margaret's voice rose, addressing the room now rather than just us. "Everyone here knows Clara Whitmore was publicly rejected and financially ruined. We all saw it happen. We all know she had nothing, no dowry, no prospects, nothing. And suddenly, she's a duchess?" She laughed. "Forgive me if I find that suspicious." The room was dead silent, everyone watching to see how I would respond. This was it. The moment Margaret had been building toward. The public humiliation that would either destroy me or prove I couldn't be destroyed. I thought about Richard Ashford's voice declaring me worthless, about walking through fire, about becoming someone new. "You're absolutely right," I said clearly. Margaret's triumphant smile faltered. I had nothing, I continued, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. No dowry, no prospects. My family was bankrupt. I was publicly rejected and financially ruined. I looked around at the sea of faces. Everyone here knows exactly what I was: desperate, powerless, and completely unsuitable for marriage to a duke by traditional standards. Confused whispers rippled through the crowd. This wasn't how someone was supposed to respond to social destruction. But here's what Lady Margaret doesn't understand, I said, meeting her eyes. That desperation taught me something most of you will never learn: the difference between what matters and what's merely decorative. I may not have a distinguished bloodline or a dowry or years of training in being ornamental, but I know how to work. I know how to manage an estate, make hard decisions, and value people based on their competence rather than their pedigree. I turned to address the room fully. The Duke didn't marry me in spite of my background. He married me because of what my background taught me, because he needed a partner who could actually do the work of being a duchess, not just wear the title. How very practical, Margaret said, her voice dripping contempt. But marriage is supposed to be about more than work, isn't it? About love, devotion, partnership of hearts. Partnership of equals, Adrian interrupted. His hand found mine, and he pulled me closer to his side, which is exactly what we have. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room, including me. He kissed me. Not the brief formal kiss from our wedding. A real kiss. Claiming, possessive, absolutely unmistakable in its meaning. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. Let me be very clear, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. My wife is not a desperate pauper who trapped me. She is the most formidable woman in this room. She has rebuilt my estate operations in 3 weeks to a level of efficiency my family hasn't seen in generations. She has personally visited every tenant family, ensured their welfare, and earned their genuine respect, not through charity, but through competent leadership. He turned to face Margaret directly. You represent everything I was raised to value: distinguished bloodline, social connections, perfect aristocratic training, and when I needed you most, you betrayed me for profit. Clara represents everything I should have valued all along: integrity, intelligence, and the courage to face impossible odds without breaking. The silence was absolute. So yes, Adrian continued, his arm around me now, solid and unmovable. I married a woman with nothing, and in doing so I gained everything that matters. Margaret's face had gone white, then red. You're making a mistake. She'll destroy your reputation, drag the Blackwood name through. The only mistake I made, Adrian said coldly, was wasting 2 years of my life with someone who mistakes cruelty for power. He turned his back on her, the ultimate social dismissal, and addressed the room. The only person here who should be embarrassed is the one who tried to buy my wife's surrender, who threatened public humiliation because she can't accept that I chose substance over status. His voice was steel. Lady Margaret Havisham is a bitter, vindictive woman who's been trying to destroy me since I had the good sense to end our engagement. I suggest everyone in this room remember that when evaluating the source of rumors. Then he looked at me, and his expression softened into something I'd never seen before: genuine warmth. Shall we dance, Duchess? I nodded, not trusting my voice. We moved onto the dance floor together, and after a moment of shocked silence, the orchestra began to play. As we waltzed through the center of that ballroom, I became aware of something shifting in the crowd. Not universal approval. Many still looked scandalized, disapproving, but some faces showed something else: respect, reassessment, the willingness to consider that maybe, just maybe, there was more than one way to be a duchess. That was quite a speech, I murmured as we turned. It was the truth. His eyes met mine, all of it. The kiss was unexpected. Was it unwelcome? I considered the question. The kiss had been strategic, yes. A public claiming meant to shut down speculation about our marriage. But it had also been something else, something real. No, I said quietly, it wasn't unwelcome. His arm tightened around my waist. Good, because I'm done pretending this is purely business. My heart stuttered. Adrian, we can discuss it later. He nodded toward the edge of the ballroom. Right now, you have someone who wants to speak with you. I followed his gaze and saw Richard Ashford standing near the refreshment table, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Our dance ended, and before I could stop him, Richard was crossing the floor toward us. "Clara," he said, his voice tight, "might I have a word?" "Anything you need to say can be said in front of my husband," I replied evenly. Richard's jaw clenched. "Fine. I just wanted to say, congratulations on your very convenient marriage." "Thank you. Though I have to wonder," he continued, voice rising slightly, "what you offered the Duke to make him overlook your complete lack of qualification, because we both know you bring nothing to this marriage but debt and desperation." The nearby conversations quieted. People were listening again, waiting to see if I would finally break. I looked at Richard, really looked at him. At the petty cruelty in his eyes, the need to diminish me because my success made him look foolish. And I felt nothing, no anger, no hurt, not even satisfaction at his obvious discomfort. Just pity. "Richard," I said quietly, "you once told 300 people that only a fool would marry a pauper." "I remember." "You were wrong," I smiled. "Only a fool would let someone's bank account determine their worth. Only a fool would choose a decorative wife over a capable partner. Only a fool would throw away someone competent because they were temporarily poor." I moved closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I'm glad you're not that foolish. Glad you had the wisdom to publicly reject me. Because if you hadn't, I'd have married you. I'd have wasted my life managing your household while you took credit for my work. I'd have been trapped in a marriage with a small, petty man who mistakes cruelty for cleverness." His face flushed dark red. "Instead," I continued, "I married a man who values what I can do more than who my father was, who trusts me with real responsibility, who built an empire from nothing and recognizes that kind of strength when he sees it." I stepped back. "So thank you, Richard, for being exactly the kind of fool I needed you to be." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there speechless. Adrian was waiting at the edge of the floor, his expression somewhere between pride and something else entirely. "That," he said, "was magnificent. I meant every word." "I know." He took my hand. "Let's go home." We left the ball early, ignoring Margaret's glare and the whispers that followed us. We'd done what we came to do, faced down the threat, refused to break, and made it clear that we stood together. The carriage ride home was quiet, both of us processing what had happened. "Margaret won't stop," I said finally. "Tonight was a defeat for her, but she'll regroup." "I know." Adrian was watching me in the darkness. "Are you sorry that you refused her offer?" I thought about the contract I'd torn in half, about the easy escape I could have taken. "No," I said honestly. "I'm not sorry. What we're building, it matters more than peace." "What are we building, Clara?" The question hung between us, loaded with meaning. "I don't know," I admitted. "Something neither of us planned for, I think." He reached across the carriage and took my hand. "Whatever it is, we're building it together." I squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from years of work that distinguished him from softer aristocrats. "Together," I agreed. We arrived at Blackwood Manor to find every window blazing with light, the entire household staff lined up at the entrance. Anne stepped forward, her face alight with barely contained excitement. Your Grace, we heard what happened at the ball. Word travels fast through the servants' network." She was practically vibrating with pride. "You stood up to Lady Margaret. You told the truth and refused to back down. Everyone's talking about it." "What are they saying?" I asked. "That the new Duchess of Blackwood is either the bravest woman in England or completely mad?" Anne grinned. "Possibly both." The staff erupted in applause, genuine, enthusiastic, proud. I looked at their faces, at the respect I'd earned through work rather than birthright, and felt something shift in my chest. This was power. Not the kind Margaret wielded through fear and manipulation, but something stronger. The loyalty of people who'd chosen to follow me because I'd proven myself worthy. "Thank you," I said to them all, "for everything you've done to make this estate what it's becoming. We're not done yet, not by a long shot, but we're building something remarkable together." More applause, and then Anne was ushering everyone back to work, the household settling into its new, efficient rhythm. Adrian and I stood in the entrance hall, alone for the first time since the ball. "You know what comes next," he said quietly. "Margaret will escalate. She'll find new ways to attack, new strategies to destroy us." "I know. And you're still willing to fight?" I thought about everything I'd survived to get here. The public humiliation, the poverty, the slow transformation from decorative daughter to capable Duchess. "I'm not just willing," I said. "I'm ready." He studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression, the last wall coming down, the final pretense dropping away. "I've been lying to myself," he said, "about what this marriage is, what you are to me." My heart was beating too fast. Adrian, this was supposed to be practical, businesslike, a partnership of convenience." He moved closer. "But somewhere between firing Mrs. Winters and rebuilding this estate and standing in that ballroom defending everything we've built, it became something else." What did it become? Something I didn't plan for. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. Something I didn't think I'd ever feel again after Margaret's betrayal. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Clara." The words were quiet but absolutely certain. "Not because you're useful or because this arrangement makes sense. I love you because you're brilliant and brave and you never break. Because you turned my house into a home and my estate into something I'm proud of. Because when the entire world said you were worthless, you proved them all wrong." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at him as my entire understanding of our relationship reorganized itself. "You don't have to say it back," he continued. "I know this isn't what we agreed to, but I needed you to know. Before whatever comes next, I needed you to know that this stopped being strategy for me weeks ago." "Adrian," I found my voice finally, "you're supposed to be the practical one, the one who doesn't believe in romantic delusions." "I know. This is very inconvenient." "I know that too, and completely unprofessional for what's supposed to be a business arrangement. Are you going to keep listing objections, or are you going to tell me if you feel the same way?" I looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd offered me survival when I had nothing, who'd trusted me with real responsibility, who'd stood beside me in that ballroom and declared me formidable when the world called me worthless, who'd somehow, impossibly, become the one person I trusted completely. "I love you too," I said, and watched his face transform. Though I have no idea when it happened. Somewhere between account ledgers and estate repairs and learning that partnership could be, he kissed me again, and this time there was no audience, no strategy, just us, alone in the entrance hall of our home, finally admitting what we'd both been feeling. When we broke apart, both of us breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "We're going to be terrible at this," he said. "We have no idea how to have a marriage that's actually about feelings." "We'll learn," I smiled against his lips. "We're both quite good at learning things we weren't raised to know." A sound from the doorway made us turn. Anne stood there, trying very hard to look professional and failing completely as she grinned. "I'm sorry to interrupt, your graces, but there's a messenger from London. Says it's urgent." Adrian sighed, stepping back. "Of course there is." The messenger brought news that drained the warmth from the night. Margaret had filed a formal complaint with the Council of Peerage, claiming Adrian's marriage was fraudulent, that I'd misrepresented my family's financial status to entrap him, and requesting an official investigation that could, if successful, result in our marriage being annulled. "She's not just attacking socially anymore," Adrian said grimly, reading the official documents. "She's using legal channels." "Can she actually do this?" I asked. "She can try." He set down the papers. "It will be messy, public, and designed to humiliate us both. The investigation alone will take months. Every detail of our lives will be examined. Your family's finances, my decision-making, our entire relationship, all of it dragged into public scrutiny." I thought about my mother and Charlotte, about the staff who just started to believe in me, about the tenants who depended on me. "What do we do?" Adrian looked at me, and I saw steel in his eyes, the same cold determination that had rebuilt an empire from ruins. "We fight," he said simply. "We fight her with every legal weapon we have. We prove that our marriage is legitimate, that you're exactly the Duchess I needed, and that she's a bitter, vindictive liar. He took my hands. It won't be easy. It won't be quick, but we will win. How can you be sure? Because we have something she doesn't. His grip tightened. The truth. And each other. I pulled him close, holding on as the reality of what we faced settled around us like a weight. Margaret wasn't just trying to embarrass me anymore. She was trying to destroy everything, our marriage, our reputation, our entire life together. And we were about to enter the fight of our lives. But as I stood there in Adrian's arms, feeling the solid warmth of him, remembering the kiss that had changed everything, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I'd survived public humiliation before. I'd rebuilt myself from nothing once already. If I had to do it again with Adrian beside me this time, I would. Whatever Margaret threw at us, we would survive it, together. The only question was whether surviving would be enough, or whether, when the dust finally settled and the investigation concluded, we'd still have a marriage left to fight for, or whether, when the dust finally settled and the investigation concluded, we'd still have a marriage left to fight for. The answer came faster than either of us expected. The Council of Peerage investigation began within days. A panel of 3 elderly peers who arrived at Blackwood Manor with the kind of pompous authority that came from generations of inherited power and very little actual work. Lord Pemberton led them, a man so old he'd probably attended my great-grandfather's christening. He surveyed our entrance hall with the expression of someone inspecting a questionable piece of fruit. "Duke Blackwood," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We are here to conduct a thorough investigation into the legitimacy of your marriage. I trust you will cooperate fully." "Of course," Adrian said smoothly. "My wife and I have nothing to hide." Lord Pemberton's gaze shifted to me, cold and assessing. "Duchess. Or should I say, Miss Whitmore? That remains to be determined." I felt Adrian tense beside me, but I kept my voice level. "I answer to Duchess Blackwood, Lord Pemberton, until your investigation proves otherwise, that is my legal name and title." His eyebrows rose. Bold words for a woman under investigation. Accurate words for a duchess defending her marriage. We showed them to the study. Adrian's father's old domain, now transformed into an efficient workspace. Anne had prepared refreshments, and the household staff moved with the precise coordination I'd drilled into them over the past months. The investigators noticed. I saw them noticing. "Your household seems well managed," Lord Pemberton observed, his tone suggesting this surprised him. "The Duchess runs an exceptional household," Adrian said, "as you'll discover if you actually investigate rather than simply validate Lady Margaret's accusations. We investigate facts, Your Grace, not opinions." Lord Pemberton settled into a chair, pulling out a leather portfolio. "Now, let us begin with the circumstances of your engagement." For 3 hours they questioned us. Every detail of how we'd met, why we'd married so quickly, what our arrangement entailed. They were looking for evidence of fraud, of deception, of a desperate woman trapping a wealthy duke. I answered every question with complete honesty. Yes, my family was bankrupt. Yes, I'd been publicly rejected by Richard Ashford. Yes, Adrian had proposed within days of my humiliation. But I also explained why, the practical reasons, the partnership we'd formed, the genuine need for a capable duchess rather than a decorative one. "So you admit," Lord Pemberton said, "that this was a marriage of convenience, not affection." "It began that way," I said carefully. "Many aristocratic marriages do. The question isn't whether we married for love, it's whether the marriage is legitimate. And by every legal standard, it is. Legal standards require honesty about financial circumstances. Lady Margaret claims you misrepresented your family's situation." "I did no such thing," my voice hardened. "The Duke knew my exact financial situation before he proposed. He reviewed my family's debts, our assets, which were none, and our prospects. He made his offer with complete information. Can you prove this?" Adrian reached into his desk and pulled out a folder. "These are the financial documents I reviewed before proposing. They're dated 3 days before our wedding. Every debt, every mortgage, every penny owed. It's all documented." Lord Pemberton took the folder, scanning the contents. His expression didn't change, but I saw the moment he realized Margaret's accusation wouldn't hold. I see. He set down the papers. And Lady Margaret's claim that you, Duchess, had ulterior motives, that you deliberately positioned yourself to trap the Duke after your public rejection? How exactly would I have done that? I asked. I met the Duke the night of my rejection. I had no way to know he'd be present, no ability to predict his actions, and certainly no leverage to force a proposal. I leaned forward. Lady Margaret is angry that the Duke chose me instead of remaining available to her. This investigation isn't about legitimacy. It's about revenge. Those are serious accusations. So are hers, Adrian interjected coldly. And at least ours have merit. Margaret has been trying to destroy my reputation for 2 years. This is simply her latest strategy. The investigation continued for 3 more days. They interviewed staff, reviewed household accounts, spoke with tenants, and examined every aspect of our marriage with the kind of intrusive thoroughness that would have been humiliating if we'd actually had something to hide. But we didn't. Every ledger balanced. Every staff member spoke well of the changes I'd implemented. Every tenant reported improved conditions and fair treatment. On the 4th day, Lord Pemberton requested a private audience with me alone. Your Grace, he said, the title sounding less skeptical this time. I need to understand something. You are, by all accounts, doing an exceptional job managing this estate. The household operations have improved dramatically under your oversight. The tenants are better cared for than they've been in years. This is not the behavior of a woman who married for money and has no intention of fulfilling her duties. No, I agreed. It's the behavior of a woman who takes her responsibilities seriously. Then why? He spread his hands. Why marry so quickly? Why enter into what was clearly a practical arrangement rather than waiting for a more traditional match? I considered how much truth to give him, then decided that complete honesty was my only real weapon. Because I was drowning, Lord Pemberton. My family was weeks away from complete destitution. My mother was selling jewelry to buy food. My 15-year-old sister was facing a future as a governess or worse. I had no prospects, no options, and no way to save us. I met his eyes. When the Duke offered me a way out, a genuine partnership where I could use my abilities rather than just my appearance, I took it. Not because I was trapping him, but because it was the only intelligent choice available. And now? Now it's become something neither of us planned for. I allowed myself a small smile. Now it's become a marriage worth defending. He studied me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled back. You remind me of my own wife, he said quietly. She married me 40 years ago because her family needed the alliance. She was honest about it. Told me on our wedding day that she respected me but didn't love me. He chuckled. Took us 5 years to fall in love. But when we did, it was stronger than any romantic delusion could have been, because it was built on truth. Then you understand. I understand that Lady Margaret is wasting everyone's time with vindictive nonsense. He stood, gathering his papers. The investigation will conclude tomorrow. The council will find your marriage completely legitimate, and Lady Margaret will have to find some other way to occupy her time. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to grip the desk to stay standing. Thank you. Don't thank me. You did this yourself. He moved toward the door, then paused. A word of advice, Duchess? Don't let people like Margaret convince you that competence is worth less than pedigree. The world is changing. Women like you, women who actually work, you're the future. The rest of them just don't know it yet. The official conclusion came the next morning. The marriage was legitimate, no fraud had occurred, and the case was closed. Margaret's response arrived by messenger that afternoon. Adrian read the letter, his expression darkening with every line. Then he handed it to me without a word. The paper shook in my hands as I read her threats. Promises of social destruction, hints about revealing scandals, vague suggestions about Adrian's business dealings that could be misinterpreted if she chose to spread certain rumors. She's desperate, I said. She's dangerous. Adrian took the letter back, his jaw tight. Desperate people make reckless choices, and Margaret has always been willing to destroy others to protect her pride. What can she actually do? The investigation cleared us. Legally, nothing. Socially? He tossed the letter into the fireplace, watching it burn. She still has allies. Women who believe her version of events. men who resent my success, families who see you as an upstart threatening the natural order. He turned to face me. We won this battle, Clara, but the war is far from over. He was right. Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret's campaign intensified. Where she'd once been subtle, now she was blatant, spreading rumors so outrageous they should have been laughable. That I'd used dark arts to trap Adrian, that our marriage was unconsummated and therefore invalid, that I was secretly still in love with Richard Ashford and planning to murder Adrian for his fortune. The accusations were absurd, but some people believed them anyway. I was snubbed at local gatherings. Invitations stopped arriving. Women I'd been cautiously befriending suddenly found reasons to avoid me. It's working, I told Adrian one evening as we reviewed yet another pile of regrets to social invitations. She's isolating us. Let her. His voice was grim. We don't need their approval. Don't we? I set down the letters. You do business with these people. Your investments require their cooperation. If Margaret succeeds in making us social pariahs, then I'll build new relationships with people who value substance over scandal. He pulled me close, his arms solid around me. I'm not losing you to satisfy their small-minded prejudices. Adrian, no! His voice was fierce. I told you that night at the ball. You're the best decision I've made in years. I meant it. If society can't accept that, society can go to hell. I should have found his certainty comforting. Instead, it terrified me. Because I could see what he couldn't, or refused to, the slow erosion of his business relationships, the whispers that were starting to affect his reputation, the way doors that had been open were gradually closing. Margaret was destroying him, using me as the weapon, and I couldn't let that continue. The solution came to me during a visit to the tenants. I was inspecting the newly repaired cottages, talking with families about their needs for the coming winter, when I overheard 2 women discussing the harvest festival. Shame the Duke and Duchess won't be attending, one said. They've done so much for us. Would be nice to show appreciation. They can't come, the other replied, not with Lady Margaret spreading those awful rumors. The gentry won't attend if they do, and without the gentry, there's no funding for the festival. I stepped forward, decision crystallizing. We'll be there. Both women startled, dropping quick curtsies. Your Grace, we didn't mean… No, you're right. We should attend. My mind was racing through implications. In fact, I want to do more than attend. I want to host it. Here, on the estate grounds. A harvest festival that celebrates the people who actually work this land, rather than the aristocrats who own it. But Your Grace, the first woman said hesitantly, the gentry always sponsor the festival. Without their money, we'll fund it ourselves, and we'll invite everyone, gentry, merchants, farmers, workers, anyone who wants to come. I was thinking faster now, strategy taking shape. We'll show them exactly what this estate has become, what we've built together. I found Adrian in his study, bent over correspondence that probably contained more social rejections. I have an idea, I said. It's risky, possibly foolish, and will either solve our problems or make them dramatically worse. He looked up, and despite everything, he smiled. Those are my favorite kind of ideas. What do you have in mind? I told him about the harvest festival, about my plan to open the estate to everyone, to showcase the work we'd done and the community we'd built. You want to make a public spectacle of ourselves, he said slowly. Again, I want to change the narrative. I moved closer, leaning against his desk. Margaret controls the story right now. She decides what people believe about us. But what if we give them a different story? Show them the truth rather than her lies. By hosting a harvest festival. By showing them a functioning, thriving estate managed by a duchess they claim is incompetent. By introducing them to tenants who are healthy and happy and loyal. By demonstrating that everything Margaret says about us is wrong. He was quiet for a long moment, thinking it through. Then he nodded. Do it. Whatever you need, money, staff, resources, it's yours. The next 3 weeks were chaos. Anne and I threw ourselves into planning with the kind of focused intensity that came from knowing this was our last real chance to change public opinion. We organized food, entertainment, competitions, exhibitions, everything needed for a proper harvest festival, and more. But more importantly, we organized a showcase. I want every tenant family there, I told Anne. I want the gentry to see the cottages we've repaired, the children who are healthy because they have proper food and medical care, the improvements we've made. I want them to see what competent estate management actually looks like. They'll see it, Your Grace. Anne was grinning, caught up in the audacity of the plan. Every single improvement documented and displayed. They'll have to be blind to miss it. We sent invitations to everyone, gentry who'd snubbed us, merchants who'd heard the rumors, families who'd stayed neutral. And we sent a special invitation to Lady Margaret Havisham. Adrian thought I was insane. "You're inviting her to our estate?" he said, staring at the cream-colored invitation in disbelief. "The woman who's been trying to destroy us? I'm giving her a chance to witness her failure." I sealed the envelope. "She can come and see exactly what her lies have accomplished, which is nothing except making us stronger. Or she can come and cause a scene that ruins everything. Then we deal with it. Together." I took his hand. "Adrian, we can't keep hiding from her. We can't keep letting her control the narrative. Either we face her directly, on our ground, with our allies present, or we let her win by default." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding tight. "When did you become the brave one?" he murmured against my hair. "I learned from you." I think it was the other way around. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect autumn day that felt like a gift. The estate grounds had been transformed into a celebration that blended tradition with genuine community. Tenant families arrived first, dressed in their best, bringing food and crafts to display. The children ran through the gardens, laughing and playing with a freedom that spoke of health and security. The adults set up stalls showcasing their work, everything from preserved foods to handcrafted tools to examples of the improved farming techniques we'd implemented. Then the gentry began arriving. I watched from the house as carriages rolled up, disgorging families who clearly weren't sure what to expect. Some looked curious, others disapproving. All of them were definitely curious. "Ready?" Adrian appeared beside me, dressed simply but elegantly, a duke who didn't need ostentation to command respect. "No," I admitted, "but we're doing it anyway." We walked out together to greet our guests. The festival was everything I'd hoped for and more. Music filled the air, not the refined chamber music of aristocratic gatherings, but folk songs played by local musicians who actually knew how to make people want to dance. Food was plentiful and genuine, roasted meats and fresh bread and autumn vegetables that tasted like they'd been grown with care. And everywhere, there was evidence of what we'd accomplished. The repaired cottages stood as proof that we valued our tenants. The healthy, happy children demonstrated that our improvements had real impact. The efficient organization showed that I actually knew how to manage an estate. I saw the moment it registered with our gentry guests, the slow realization that everything Margaret had said about me was demonstrably false. "Duchess Blackwood," Lady Hartwell approached, her expression a mixture of surprise and reassessment. "This is quite remarkable. I had no idea you'd accomplished so much in such a short time." "Thank you, Lady Hartwell." I kept my voice warm but professional. "The Duke and I believe in active estate management. These improvements benefit everyone, the tenants, the estate's productivity, and the community as a whole." "And you organized all this yourself?" "With help from excellent staff, yes." I gestured to where Anne was coordinating food distribution. Good management is about identifying capable people and empowering them to excel. Lady Hartwell studied me with new eyes. "I may have been too quick to credit certain rumors." "Rumors are easy to spread, Lady Hartwell. Truth requires evidence." I smiled. "But I'm glad you're here to see the evidence for yourself." One by one, I watched the same realization ripple through our guests. The gentry who'd believed Margaret's lies were confronted with undeniable proof that I was exactly what Adrian had claimed, a capable, intelligent duchess who actually did the work. And then Margaret arrived. She swept onto the grounds like a queen entering enemy territory, surrounded by her usual coterie of loyal followers. Her gown was exquisite, her bearing perfect, her smile sharp as a blade. "Duchess Blackwood," she said loudly, ensuring everyone nearby could hear. "What a charming little festival, so very rustic." "Lady Margaret," I kept my voice level. "Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it. Her eyes swept the grounds, taking in the celebration, the happy tenants, the evidence of successful management. I saw frustration flicker across her face. Though I'm surprised you felt comfortable hosting such a public event given all the questions about your suitability. Those questions have been answered. The investigation found our marriage completely legitimate. Oh, legally, perhaps. Her voice dripped condescension. But we both know legitimacy and suitability aren't the same thing. You can call yourself a duchess, but that doesn't mean you actually— Lady Margaret. The interruption came from an unexpected source, Lord Pemberton, the lead investigator, who'd apparently accepted our invitation to the festival. He moved through the crowd with the kind of authority that made even Margaret pause. I believe we've had quite enough baseless accusations, he said clearly. I've spent the last hour touring this estate, speaking with tenants, reviewing the improvements implemented under the Duchess's management. What I've seen is extraordinary, possibly the best managed estate in the county. The crowd had gone silent, everyone watching this confrontation. Furthermore, Lord Pemberton continued, I've reviewed the household accounts, the tenant agreements, and the systematic changes made to estate operations. The Duchess has achieved in 3 months what most estate managers can't accomplish in years. He turned to face Margaret directly. Your accusations of incompetence are not merely wrong, they're laughably false, and your continued campaign of defamation is becoming tiresome. Margaret's face had gone white. Lord Pemberton, I never meant to imply— You implied quite clearly. You've spent months claiming this marriage was fraudulent, that the Duchess was incompetent, that the Duke made a terrible mistake. His voice was steel. You were wrong on every count, and it's time you accepted that and moved on. I have every right to express concern about what? Adrian's voice cut through the tension as he appeared beside me, his arm sliding around my waist. About a marriage that's more successful than yours ever would have been? About a Duchess who's accomplished more in 3 months than you managed in 2 years of engagement? Margaret's eyes blazed with fury. How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? Adrian pulled me closer. You wanted to destroy Clara because I chose her over you. But all you've accomplished is proving that I made the right choice. He looked around at the assembled crowd. Everyone here can see what we've built. A thriving estate, happy tenants, efficient operations, genuine partnership. That's what a real marriage looks like, not the shallow social alliance you wanted. You'll regret this, Margaret hissed. Both of you. I'll make sure— You'll do nothing. Lord Pemberton's voice was final. Because if you continue this harassment, I'll personally ensure the council takes action against you for malicious defamation. The investigation is closed, Lady Margaret. The matter is settled. Accept it. For the first time since I'd met her, Margaret looked truly uncertain. Her supporters were already backing away, clearly unwilling to align themselves with someone Lord Pemberton was publicly rebuking. She stared at us. At me, specifically, with such concentrated hatred that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she turned and swept away, her coterie scrambling to follow. The silence that followed her departure lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then someone started clapping. I turned to see one of the tenant farmers, an older man named John Miller, whose cottage we'd repaired first, applauding openly. His wife joined him. Then another family, then another. Within moments, half the festival was applauding, the sound building into something that felt like vindication. Well, Adrian murmured in my ear, that went better than expected. I laughed, actual, genuine laughter that felt like releasing months of tension. We really need to stop making public spectacles of ourselves. Where's the fun in that? Lord Pemberton approached us, his stern expression softening into something almost warm. Duchess, Your Grace, I apologize for the disruption. Lady Margaret has become increasingly irrational in her vendetta. It was time someone stopped her publicly. Thank you, I said sincerely, for everything, the investigation, your support today. I supported the truth, he interrupted. Nothing more. Though I will say, he glanced around at the festival, at the obvious success of our estate management. You've proven something important here. Not just that your marriage is legitimate, but that perhaps we've been defining suitable incorrectly all along. How so? We measure suitability by bloodline and dowry, by whether someone was raised for the role. He met my eyes. But perhaps we should measure it by competence, intelligence, and genuine dedication to the work. By those standards, Duchess, you're the most suitable woman I've encountered in decades. The compliment caught me off guard, emotion tightening my throat. That means more than you know, Lord Pemberton. You've earned it, he nodded to both of us. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe I saw some excellent cider at the refreshment tent. As he walked away, Adrian pulled me fully into his arms, right there in front of everyone. We did it, he said quietly. We actually won. We survived, I corrected. That's not quite the same as winning. Clara. He tilted my face up to meet his eyes. Look around. Really look. I did. I saw tenant families celebrating genuine security for the first time in years. Staff members working with pride and efficiency. Local gentry who'd been hostile now talking with tenant farmers like equals, seeing the humanity in people they'd always dismissed. A community coming together across traditional class boundaries because we'd shown them a different way was possible, and I saw respect in their eyes. Not for my title, but for the work I'd done. We didn't just survive, Adrian said. We changed the game entirely. We made them see that worth isn't about bloodline or bank accounts. It's about what you do with what you're given. Even when you're given nothing? Especially then. He kissed me, soft and sweet and absolutely certain. You took nothing and built everything. That's not survival, love. That's victory. The festival continued late into the evening, music and laughter filling the autumn air. I danced with Adrian, with tenant farmers, with local merchants who were finally seeing me as an ally rather than a threat. I accepted congratulations from gentry who'd snubbed me weeks ago, watching as social barriers that had seemed permanent began to crack. Lady Hartwell approached me near midnight as the festival was winding down. Duchess, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. I believe things about you, things Margaret said, without ever bothering to verify them. That was wrong of me. Thank you for saying so. More than that, I want to offer my support. She glanced around, ensuring we had relative privacy. There are other women like me, women who questioned Margaret's accusations but didn't feel strong enough to speak up publicly. After today, after seeing what you've accomplished, she smiled. I think you'll find you have more allies than you realized. I would welcome that, I said honestly. Good. Because the world is changing, whether people like Margaret accept it or not. Women like you, women who actually work, who prove their worth through action rather than inheritance, you're showing us a different path. She squeezed my hand. Some of us are finally brave enough to follow it. After she left, I stood alone for a moment, watching the last of the festival. The candles were burning low, casting everything in golden light. Families were gathering their children, saying goodbyes, promising to see each other soon. This was what we'd built. Not just an efficient estate or successful household, but a genuine community where people's worth was measured by their character and contribution rather than their bloodline. Adrian found me there, wrapping his arms around me from behind. What are you thinking? He murmured. That 3 months ago I was standing in a ballroom being told I was worthless, that only a fool would marry me. And now? Now I'm standing in my home surrounded by people who value me for exactly who I am. I leaned back against him. I'm thinking Richard Ashford was absolutely right. He was. Only a fool would have married the woman I was then. Someone who'd been taught her only value was in being decorative, who believed her worth depended on male approval and social acceptance. I turned in his arms to face him. The woman I am now? She's worth marrying. She's worth fighting for, worth building a life with. His expression softened into something that made my heart stutter. Yes, he said simply. She absolutely is. Thank you, I said quietly, for seeing that before I did, for giving me the chance to become her. Thank you for proving me right, he kissed my forehead, and for making this marriage so much more than I ever expected it to be. We stood there together as the last candles burned down and the festival ended, two people who'd started with nothing but necessity and built something neither of us had planned for, something real, something lasting, something worth every battle we'd fought to protect it. The next morning, a letter arrived from Margaret. Adrian read it first, his expression unreadable. Then he handed it to me. It was short, vicious, and unmistakably a final admission of defeat. You've won this round. But don't mistake a battle for the war. Enjoy your little victory while it lasts. I folded the letter carefully and handed it back. Should I be worried? I asked. Probably. Adrian tossed it into the fire. Margaret doesn't know how to admit defeat gracefully. She'll find some other way to cause trouble eventually. But not today. No. He pulled me close. Not today. And as I stood there in his arms, watching Margaret's threat burn to ash, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I wasn't afraid of society's judgment, or whispered rumors, or public humiliation, because I'd survived all of it once already. And I'd learned that the only opinion that truly mattered was my own, and the opinions of people whose respect I'd actually earned. The rest could burn like Margaret's letter, reduced to ash and forgotten. We'd won more than a battle. We'd won the right to define ourselves on our own terms, to build a marriage and a life that didn't conform to anyone's expectations but our own. And that I realized with sudden clarity was the only victory that actually mattered. Everything else was just noise. Everything else was just noise. The words became my anchor over the following months as winter settled over Blackwood Manor and the estate transformed into something I barely recognized from those first desperate days. The Harvest Festival had changed more than social perception. It had fundamentally shifted how people viewed the role of a duchess. Invitations began arriving again, but different ones. Not requests for me to grace ballrooms as decoration, but genuine inquiries about estate management techniques, tenant welfare programs, household efficiency systems. I became, improbably, a consultant. Lady Westbrook wants to know about your crop rotation schedule, Anne reported one morning, sorting through correspondence. And Mrs. Ashford, Richard's mother, she paused, clearly savoring the irony, has requested a meeting to discuss improving conditions for her tenants. I looked up sharply. Richard's mother? She was quite insistent. Said she'd been wrong about you and wanted to learn from someone who actually knows what they're doing. Anne's smile was triumphant. Those were her exact words, Your Grace. The meeting happened a week later in our refurbished drawing room. Mrs. Ashford arrived looking uncomfortable, her usual aristocratic certainty replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. Duchess Blackwood, she said, the title sounding strange in her mouth. Thank you for seeing me. Mrs. Ashford. I gestured to a seat. Tea. We sat across from each other, two women who'd last spoken when she was smugly watching her son destroy my reputation. The memory hung between us, unacknowledged but impossible to ignore. I'll be direct, she said finally. I was wrong about you. Completely, utterly wrong. I encouraged Richard to end your engagement publicly because I thought you were beneath our family, that your poverty made you unsuitable. She met my eyes. I've spent the last 3 months watching you transform an estate, improve tenant lives, and prove that worth has nothing to do with bank accounts. And I realized something. What's that? My son is an idiot. She said it flatly, without apology. He threw away the best thing that could have happened to him because he was too shallow to see value beyond a dowry, and I helped him do it. The admission caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness, perhaps, or careful political maneuvering, not this blunt honesty. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to learn from you. She leaned forward. Not how to manage an estate, though I do need that, but how to see people clearly. How to measure worth by what matters rather than what's convenient. She paused. How to be the kind of woman who builds something real instead of just maintaining appearances. I studied her. This woman who'd smiled while I was humiliated, who'd considered my poverty a stain on their family name. And I saw something I recognized, the slow, painful realization that everything you believed was wrong. I'd had that realization standing in the rain after Richard's rejection. She was having it now. The first step, I said quietly, is admitting that the old ways don't work anymore. That measuring people by bloodline and inheritance leaves you surrounded by beautiful, useless decorations instead of actual partners. And the second step? Work. Actual, hard, unglamorous work. I pulled out the estate ledgers I'd been reviewing. If you're serious about learning, let's start with your household accounts. I'll show you exactly where you're bleeding money and why. We spent 3 hours going through her estate operations, and I watched her face change as she realized how much waste, how much inefficiency, how much preventable suffering existed in a system she'd never bothered to examine. "This is criminal," she said finally, staring at the numbers. "My tenants are living in these conditions while I spend more on a single ball than it would cost to repair every cottage on the property." "Yes," I agreed. "It is." "How did you see this so quickly when I never did?" "Because I had nothing to lose by questioning the system. You had everything invested in believing it worked." I closed the ledger. "Privilege is comfortable, Mrs. Ashford. It's easy to ignore problems when you're not the one suffering from them." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Richard came to see me last week. Asked if I thought he'd made a mistake letting you go." My heart didn't skip, didn't race. I felt nothing but mild curiosity. "What did you tell him?" "That he didn't let you go. He threw you away, and that you were smart enough to build something better without him." She smiled, sad and genuine. "He didn't like that answer very much." "I imagine not. He asked if I thought you'd take him back, if the Duke died or if something happened to your marriage." She met my eyes. "I told him that even if you were widowed tomorrow, you wouldn't look twice at him, because you've become someone who doesn't settle anymore." "You told him the truth." "Yes." She stood gathering her things. "Thank you, Duchess, for your time and your honesty, and for proving that people like me, people who've benefited from the old system, can still learn to do better." After she left, Adrian found me still sitting in the drawing room, staring at the ledgers. "Mrs. Ashford was here," he observed. "She apologized and asked me to teach her estate management." He settled into the chair she'd vacated. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That the system she's upheld is cruel and wasteful. That she's been complicit in suffering she never bothered to see." I looked at him, and then I showed her how to fix it. "You could have refused. After everything her family did to you, I could have." I closed the ledger. "But what's the point of learning how to do this right if I don't share it? If I keep the knowledge to myself, I'm no better than the people who excluded me for being poor." He leaned back, studying me with that expression I'd come to recognize, pride mixed with something deeper. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly. "You know that?" "I'm practical. There's a difference." "No?" He moved closer, taking my hands. "You're extraordinary, because you survived a system designed to destroy you, figured out how to master it, and now you're using that knowledge to help the very people who hurt you most." He kissed my knuckles. "That's not practical. That's grace." "I don't feel graceful. I feel tired." "Then rest." He pulled me to my feet. "Let someone else save the world for a day." But the world, it seemed, wasn't ready to be saved yet. The blow came a week before Christmas, delivered in an official-looking envelope bearing the royal seal. Adrian read it once, his face going carefully blank. Then he handed it to me without a word. I scanned the formal language, my heart sinking with every line. An official inquiry into the Duke of Blackwood's business practices, allegations of improper dealings, investigation by the Crown's Financial Oversight Committee, testimony required from both Duke and Duchess. "Margaret," I said flatly. "Margaret," he confirmed. "She couldn't destroy us socially, so she's trying legally. Again." "What are they accusing you of?" "Fraud, essentially. Claims that I've been manipulating investments, using inside information, engaging in practices that—" He stopped, jaw tight. "None of it is true. But proving that will require opening every business dealing I've conducted for the past 5 years to royal scrutiny." "Can they actually do this?" "They can investigate. Whether they find anything is another matter." He moved to the window, staring out at snow-covered grounds. "But the investigation alone will be devastating. Business partners won't work with someone under royal inquiry. Investors will pull out. Everything I've built could collapse while they dig through years of paperwork looking for crimes that don't exist." I stood beside him, my mind already working through implications. "Unless we give them something else to find." He turned sharply. "What?" "They're investigating your business practices, looking for fraud or impropriety." I was thinking faster now, the shape of a strategy forming. What if instead they find evidence of something else entirely, something that makes Margaret's accusations look even more malicious? I'm not following. Your business records show everything, right? Every investment, every decision, every transaction. Yes, including the ones Margaret sabotaged when you were engaged to her. His eyes widened. I never formally documented that. I just ended the engagement and moved on. Then we document it now. We give the investigators a complete picture, not just your business practices, but the context around them. We show them exactly what Margaret did, why you ended the engagement, and establish a clear pattern of vindictive behavior. I grabbed his hands. We turn this investigation into proof of her malice rather than your guilt. That's risky. If it backfires, then we're in exactly the same position we're in now. I squeezed his hands. But if it works, we don't just clear your name. We end this permanently. No more investigations, no more accusations, no more wondering when she'll strike next. He studied me for a long moment. Then he pulled me close, resting his forehead against mine. When did you become the strategist in this marriage? I learned from the best. We do this together, always together. The next 2 weeks were brutal. We assembled every business record, every piece of correspondence, every documented interaction with Margaret during their engagement. Adrian's solicitor worked around the clock building the case, while I managed the household and kept the estate running smoothly despite the mounting pressure. The royal investigators arrived 3 days after Christmas, stern men in expensive clothes who clearly expected to find a corrupt aristocrat and his accomplice wife. What they found instead was a meticulously documented case of sabotage, betrayal, and ongoing harassment. We laid it all out for them in the study, ledgers showing Margaret's family profiting from information she'd gained during the engagement, correspondence proving she'd deliberately fed Adrian's competitors advanced knowledge of his investment strategies, testimony from business partners who'd been approached by Margaret with offers to betray Adrian for financial gain, and most damning, a complete timeline of her attacks after he'd ended their engagement. The social campaigns, the legal accusations, the systematic attempt to destroy both his reputation and his business. This is quite comprehensive, the lead investigator said, reviewing the mountain of evidence. Why wasn't this brought to authorities earlier? Because I was trying to move on, Adrian said quietly. I thought ending the engagement would be enough, that she'd eventually accept it and find someone else. He gestured at the documents. I was wrong. She spent 2 years trying to destroy me, and when that didn't work, she turned her attention to my wife. The accusations against the Duchess, the investigator said, the claims about your marriage being fraudulent, those were Lady Margaret's doing as well. Provably so. I handed him another folder. Here's the documentation from the Council of Peerage investigation. Lord Pemberton's conclusion was that our marriage is completely legitimate and Margaret's accusations were baseless. The investigator spent 3 days reviewing everything. When he finally delivered his conclusion, his expression was carefully neutral, but his words were devastating for Margaret. The Crown finds no evidence of improper business practices by Duke Blackwood. In fact, his conduct has been exemplary, possibly the most transparent and ethical business operations we've reviewed in recent memory. He paused. However, we do find substantial evidence of malicious harassment and false accusations by Lady Margaret Havisham. The Crown is prepared to pursue formal charges if you wish to press them. Adrian and I exchanged glances. What would those charges accomplish? I asked. Legal consequences. Fines, social censure, possible restrictions on her ability to make future accusations. The investigator set down his papers. Justice, essentially. I thought about Margaret's face at the Harvest Festival, about the desperation in her final letter, about the slow, painful reality that she'd lost and couldn't accept it. No charges, I said quietly. Adrian turned to me sharply. Clara. No charges, I repeated. We've proven our point. We've cleared your name and established her pattern of malicious behavior. Legal charges would just drag this out, keep us tied to her vindictiveness for more months or years. I looked at the investigator. I want this to be over. Completely over. No more investigations, no more accusations, no more Margaret Havisham controlling our lives. The investigator nodded slowly. A wise choice, perhaps. The case will be closed with a formal exoneration for Duke Blackwood, and a notation that future accusations from Lady Havisham will be viewed with extreme skepticism. That's enough, I said. After they left, Adrian pulled me into his arms, holding tight. You let her go, he said quietly, after everything she did. I let us go, I corrected. From anger, from revenge, from the need to punish her. She lost, Adrian. She lost everything, her reputation, her credibility, her power to hurt us. Making it official with legal charges wouldn't change that. It would just keep us chained to her. You're a better person than I am. No, I'm just tired of fighting. I pulled back to look at him. I want to build instead of destroy. Create instead of punish. I want us to focus on our life together instead of on the people who tried to ruin it. He kissed me, soft and deep and full of emotion that didn't need words. I love you, he said when we finally broke apart. More every day, in ways I didn't know were possible. I love you too. I traced his jaw with my fingers. You saved me, you know. That night at the Ashford ball when you offered me partnership instead of pity, you saved my life. No, his voice was fierce. You saved yourself. I just gave you the tools. Everything else, the strength, the intelligence, the courage to rebuild, that was all you. We saved each other then. Yes, he agreed. We did. The news of Adrian's exoneration spread through society like wildfire. What had been whispered doubts became vocal support. What had been cautious acceptance became genuine respect. And Margaret Havisham, beautiful, powerful, vengeful Margaret, simply disappeared. Not physically. But socially, she might as well have ceased to exist. No one would receive her. No invitations arrived. The women who'd been her allies melted away, unwilling to associate with someone the Crown had essentially labeled a malicious liar. I heard, months later, that she'd left London entirely. Gone to the continent, some said. Others claimed she'd married some minor foreign noble and moved abroad permanently. I didn't care enough to verify. She'd become exactly what she'd feared most. Irrelevant. Spring came to Blackwood Manor with a gentleness that felt like absolution. The gardens bloomed, the tenants planted new crops using improved techniques, and the house settled into a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like actual living. I was reviewing quarterly accounts when Anne knocked on the study door. Your Grace, you have visitors. I looked up, surprised. We weren't expecting anyone. Who? Lord Pemberton, Lady Hartwell, and about a dozen other members of the local gentry. Anne's eyes were dancing with barely suppressed excitement. They say they have a proposal for you. Curious and slightly concerned, I went to meet them in the drawing room. Lord Pemberton stood as I entered, and I was startled to see genuine warmth in his usually stern expression. Duchess Blackwood, he said, thank you for seeing us on short notice. Of course. What's this about? We have a proposition. He gestured to the assembled group. We've all been watching what you've accomplished here. The estate improvements, the tenant welfare programs, the systematic changes you've implemented, and we've been discussing among ourselves the possibility of, he paused, choosing words carefully, broader application of your methods. I'm not sure I understand, Lady Hartwell spoke up. What Lord Pemberton is trying to say is that we want to hire you, as a consultant, to help us implement similar improvements on our own estates. I stared at her. You want to hire me? Not just us. Lord Pemberton pulled out a document. We've formed a consortium, 23 estates in total. We're prepared to offer you a formal position as chief consultant for estate management and tenant welfare. You'd be paid, of course. Quite well. And you'd have complete authority to recommend and implement changes. This is... I struggled to find words. This is extraordinary. What's extraordinary is what you've proven is possible. He set down the document. For generations, we've managed estates the same way, with minimal oversight, traditional methods, and little concern for the people actually doing the work. You've shown us a different way, a better way, one that's more efficient, more humane, and frankly more profitable. We want to learn from you, Lady Hartwell added, not just your methods, but your philosophy, how to measure success by genuine improvement rather than just maintaining tradition. I looked around at their faces, aristocrats who would have sneered at me a year ago, now asking me to teach them, wanting to pay me for expertise they'd once claimed I couldn't possibly have. "I'll need to discuss this with the Duke," I said carefully. "Of course," Lord Pemberton smiled. "But I hope you'll say yes, because what you're doing here, it's bigger than one estate. It's a model for how we can all do better, and we need someone to show us how." I found Adrian in the stables, reviewing breeding stock with the estate manager. He looked up as I approached, immediately reading my expression. "What happened?" "I was just offered a job." His eyebrows rose. "A job?" I told him about the consortium, about their proposal, about 23 estates wanting to implement the changes we'd pioneered at Blackwood Manor. "They want to pay you," he said slowly, "to teach them how to manage their own estates." "Apparently." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he started laughing, genuine, delighted laughter that made the stable manager look over in surprise. "What's funny?" I demanded. "You." He pulled me close, still laughing. "A year ago, you were declared worthless, unmarriageable, someone only a fool would want. And now you're being offered a position that doesn't even have a precedent. What do we even call this? Chief Consultant for Estate Excellence? Duchess of Fixing Everyone's Terrible Management? You're not taking this seriously." "I'm taking it very seriously." He sobered slightly, though his eyes still danced. "This is remarkable, Clara. You've created a completely new role, one that didn't exist before you proved it was necessary. So you think I should accept? I think you should do whatever makes you happy." His voice softened. "But yes, I think you should accept. Because you're brilliant at this, and limiting that brilliance to one estate, even our estate, is wasteful. It would mean traveling, being away from home sometimes. I'll manage. I did before I married the most competent woman in England." He kissed my forehead. "Take the job, love. Change the world. I'll be here when you come home." I accepted the position 3 days later. The work was challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exhausting. I traveled between estates, reviewed accounts, interviewed tenants, and slowly, methodically, helped transform the way aristocratic properties were managed across the entire county. Some landowners were resistant. Some fired me after a single consultation, unwilling to accept that their traditional methods were failing. But others embraced the changes, and within 6 months the improvements were undeniable. Tenant health improved, estate productivity increased, costs went down while quality of life went up. The numbers didn't lie, and even the most traditional aristocrats had to acknowledge that my methods worked. I became, improbably, influential, not because of my title, though being a duchess helped open doors, but because I could prove, with ledgers and statistics and tangible results, that there was a better way to do things. The season's most important ball, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebration, arrived in June. It was the event of the decade, with every aristocrat in England vying for an invitation. Adrian and I received ours with a personal note from the Queen's secretary requesting my presence specifically to discuss matters of estate management and social reform. "The Queen wants to meet with you," Adrian said, reading the note over my shoulder. "Officially, as her consultant on improving Crown properties." That's terrifying. That's recognition. He turned me to face him. "A year ago, you were standing in a ballroom being publicly humiliated. Now the Queen wants your advice. Clara, do you understand how extraordinary that is?" The ball was everything I'd expected. Opulent, overwhelming, packed with the most powerful people in the country. But walking into it felt completely different than walking into the Ashford ball. Then, I'd been powerless and desperate, clinging to an engagement that was about to be ripped away. Now, I was the Duchess of Blackwood, chief consultant for estate management to 23 properties, and someone the Queen had specifically requested to meet. The difference was staggering. Duchess Blackwood. The announcement of our arrival turned heads throughout the ballroom, not with malicious curiosity this time, but with genuine respect. We moved through the crowd, and I saw faces from that horrible night at the Ashford ball. Lady Margaret's former allies, looking uncomfortable. Richard's family, studying me with expressions ranging from regret to grudging admiration. And Richard himself, standing near the refreshment table, watching me with something that looked like genuine pain. He's staring, Adrian murmured. Let him. But as we passed, Richard stepped forward, blocking our path. Clara, he said, his voice low. May I have a word? Anything you need to say can be said in front of my husband. He flinched, but didn't back down. I wanted to apologize for what I did that night, how I did it. I was cruel and petty, and you were exactly who you were, I interrupted quietly. Someone who valued appearances over substance, money over character, someone who couldn't see past a bank account to recognize actual worth. I know that now. Do you? I studied him, this man who'd once had the power to destroy me with words, who looks so small now, so diminished by his own choices. Because I don't think you do, Richard. I think you regret losing something valuable, but I don't think you actually understand why it was valuable. Then tell me, his voice was almost pleading, tell me what I missed. I looked at Adrian, at my husband, my partner, the man who'd offered me survival and ended up giving me everything that mattered, then back at Richard. You missed the chance to build something real, to partner with someone who could have made you better, instead of just making you look good. I smiled, and there was no cruelty in it, just honest pity. You wanted a decoration, Richard. Adrian wanted an equal. That's the difference between you. I turned away, and Adrian's hand found mine, solid, warm, absolutely certain. As we moved deeper into the ballroom, I heard Richard's voice behind us, quiet and broken. I really was a fool. Yes, I said without turning back. You were. The Queen's reception was brief but significant. She asked detailed questions about estate management, tenant welfare, and the economic benefits of treating workers as human beings rather than expendable resources. Her secretary took notes, and before we left, she personally thanked me for bringing much-needed reform to antiquated systems. As Adrian and I walked through the palace gardens afterward, the weight of everything that had happened finally settled over me. Are you all right? He asked. I'm thinking about that night, the Ashford ball. I stopped, turning to face him. Do you remember what you said to me when you found me in the entrance hall? That your exit was admirably done. You said most women would have caused a scene, tears, hysterics. I smiled at the memory. You saw something in me that night that I didn't see in myself. I saw a survivor. You saw more than that. I moved closer, taking both his hands. You saw potential, strength, the ability to become something more than circumstances allowed. You saw the woman I could be, even when I was at my absolute lowest. And you became her. His voice was fierce with pride. You became everything I saw and more, everything I didn't even know was possible. We became everything together. He kissed me there in the palace gardens, with moonlight turning everything silver and the sounds of the ball filtering through open windows. And I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from desperation to partnership to something deeper than either of us had planned for. Do you ever wonder, I asked when we finally broke apart, what would have happened if you hadn't been at the Ashford ball that night? If you hadn't seen me fall? Every day. His arms tightened around me, and every day I'm grateful I was there, that I was smart enough to recognize what I was seeing, that I offered you partnership instead of pity. Richard was right, you know, in a way. About what? Only a fool would have married a pauper. I smiled up at him. But it takes wisdom to recognize that poverty and worth aren't the same thing, that sometimes the woman with nothing is exactly the woman who has everything that matters. Are you calling me wise? I'm calling you the smartest man I've ever met, because you saw value where everyone else saw worthlessness. You offered partnership where others would have offered charity. You built an empire once from ruins, and then you helped me build myself from ruins, too. His eyes were bright with emotion. I love you, more than I have words for. I love you, too. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Thank you for being foolish enough to marry a pauper, for being wise enough to see what she could become. Thank you for becoming her, for proving that the only opinion that matters is the one we have of ourselves. He pulled back to look at me. And for building a life with me that's more than either of us dreamed possible. We stayed there until the ball ended, wrapped in each other and the quiet certainty that we'd won more than social acceptance or professional recognition. We'd won ourselves, our partnership, our right to define success on our own terms. And in the end, that was the only victory that truly mattered. Months turned into years. The consortium grew to over 50 estates. My consulting work expanded to include the Crown's properties. Adrian's business empire continued to thrive, built on the foundation of transparent ethics and genuine partnership we'd established together. My mother and Charlotte flourished in their cottage on our grounds. My mother finally relaxed and happy, Charlotte growing into a confident young woman who'd absorbed the lessons of my transformation. She attended university, scandalizing society by choosing education over immediate marriage. I couldn't have been prouder. And Blackwood Manor became exactly what we'd envisioned, a working estate that balanced productivity with humanity, efficiency with care, tradition with progressive reform. But more than that, it became home. 5 years after that horrible night at the Ashford Ball, I stood in the same entrance hall where I'd first agreed to marry Adrian. But everything had changed. The house gleamed with care and attention. The staff moved with practiced efficiency and genuine pride. Through the windows, I could see tenant families whose children were healthy and educated, whose cottages were weatherproof and warm, whose futures held possibility instead of just survival. Adrian found me there, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. That night, when Richard stood in front of 300 people and declared that only a fool would marry a pauper. And he was absolutely right. I turned in his arms to face him. Only a fool would have married the woman I was then, someone who'd been taught her only value was in being decorative, who believed worth was measured in bank accounts and bloodlines. But it takes real wisdom to marry the woman I could become, to see potential in poverty, to offer partnership to someone who had nothing material but everything that actually mattered. I touched his face. "You were the fool who saw what no one else could see, who bet everything on a desperate woman with no prospects. Best decision I ever made." "Mine too." I smiled. "They still talk about us, in ballrooms and drawing rooms all across England, about the disgraced pauper who married a duke and transformed everything she touched. What do they say? That I'm either the luckiest woman in England or the most calculating." I laughed. "They can't decide if you saved me or if I trapped you. What's the truth?" I thought about survival and partnership, about building something from nothing, about learning that the only validation that matters is the kind you give yourself. "The truth is that we saved each other. You gave me the tools to rebuild myself. I gave you a reason to believe in partnership instead of just transactions." I pulled him closer. "We built something neither of us could have built alone. And now? Now we keep building, keep proving that there's more than one way to measure worth, that competence matters more than pedigree, that love built on truth is stronger than romance built on illusion." He kissed me, soft and sweet, and full of everything we'd become together. "I love you, Clara Blackwood. Duchess, consultant, revolutionary, and the wisest fool I ever met. I love you too, my partner, my equal, and the man wise enough to bet on me when I had nothing." We stood there together in the home we'd built, surrounded by the life we'd created, and I thought about Richard's words one final time. Only a fool would marry a pauper. He'd meant it as condemnation, as proof of my worthlessness. But he'd been wrong about everything that mattered. Because sometimes the greatest wisdom looks like foolishness to people who can't see beyond surface appearances. Sometimes the smartest decision is the one that makes no sense on paper. Sometimes the woman with nothing is exactly the woman who has everything. And sometimes, just sometimes, the fool who marries a pauper ends up winning everything that actually matters. A partnership built on truth. A love earned through struggle. A life defined by what they built together rather than what they inherited apart. In the end, Richard was right about one thing. Only a fool would have married me. And thank heaven, Adrian was exactly that kind of fool. The kind wise enough to recognize that real worth can't be measured in bank accounts. The kind brave enough to build something new instead of just maintaining something old. The kind of fool who became the wisest man I ever knew. Together, we'd proven that survival isn't about accepting your circumstances. It's about transforming them. That worth isn't inherited, it's earned. And that sometimes the greatest victories come from the moments when you refuse to accept someone else's definition of your value. We'd both been shaped by fire. Him by nearly losing everything, me by being publicly declared worthless. And from those ashes, we'd built something remarkable, not just an estate or a marriage or professional success, but proof that the only opinion that truly matters is the one we have of ourselves. Everything else? Everything else was just noise. And we'd learned to silence it completely.